Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, July 14th. I would have started about 20 minutes earlier if I hadn't been thrown into a 5 gigabyte update. So I guess that explains why there really hasn't been that many updates lately, is that they were just working on a new version. From this update onward, the game will automatically update upon launch for Steam users instead of having to click to download. But ideally, I'm still not sure that they're using the best system there, because ideally, when the app was closed, Steam should be able to automatically update everything. And there's clearly a divide that is much more mobile phone friendly in this game, or in the previous versions of this game, where you get a very small executable update every now and then, but then the data as far as the pictures of the cards and the textures and all of that is massive amounts, and you have to confirm that. And that makes sense if you're on a data plan or a poor cell phone data network, where it would take forever to download. I'm on a pretty good internet and it took forever to download. I imagine some of that is Master Duel's own servers. But as far as being on PC and Steam, it should all automatically update. So we have a new selection pack, apparently, called Dreaded Conspiracy. We'll look at that. We've been saving up our gems to account for that. A new secret pack called The Trap in the Wicked Castle, or Catsul. Is that a mispronounce? A mistype? Yeah, Castle. Cards like Lovely Labyrinth Silver Castle, C-A-S-T-L-E. The Trap in the Wicked Catsul, C-A-T-S-L-E. They've moved the S in the wrong place. They are Japanese, though, so they also are Konami, though, so they have enough money to hire a translator to spell check things. New accessories: a protector and another protector and an icon frame, and a mate base. Just more garbage to buy things on. Then here's a note on pre-release cards for certain structure decks. They've included pre-release cards that were previously released in structure decks in the Master Pack. These cards are now included in the Master Pack and now can be generated. Will also have a chance to appear as the first to fourth cards in secret packs. So when they're using the phrase here, as far as pre-release, I don't think these are cards that are pre-released to the Japanese version of Yu-Gi-Oh! By any means. I still think we are probably 2,000 or 3,000 cards away from having all the cards in this game that are in the Japanese version. We may only be a few hundred away, or right in line with what the global Western version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is at, though, so we may have that. There's also some issues here that they're mentioning. I was thinking at 5 gigabytes updates, though, you would potentially have a whole new interface, and that there would be perhaps some major improvements, but at least on this first screen, it seems like it's all the same. Before I do anything in the shop, though, I want to go to the deck and see if perhaps, just perhaps, the pre-release change here would have let me dismantled any extra cards. No. So for the cards that I have many copies of here, 9+ copies of this card in particular, we still have that situation where when you're getting these in structured decks, if there's 3 copies in 3 different structured decks, you just can never dismantle any of that overlap. And if they ever did fix that, then I would be in a very good position. Let's see. Let's start with the accessories. I think that's the easiest thing to do. Here, a mate's base for 100. We have 7,690. Just another thing that I would almost certainly never use, but I would still purchase just to get it out of the way. Card backs, I at some point might have chosen to use, but it's just not really worth the time to goof around with this stuff. At a certain level, if I was going to engage with card backs, I should first engage with deck building, and that's the thing I'm particularly bad at. Let's also just come over here and let's see if, like, this is 69 days left on this gold pass. It does seem like they may have moved around some things under the special category. No structured decks, but noticeably interesting. You scroll down low enough on the structured decks and it just moves into accessories. Does that work here? Yes, it does. So that's interesting. Now things are different. How many cards are now included? 7,520 as far as the Master Duel. That seems to be the same for Master Packs. About summon, cut in, playback. You can view cards summon, cut in, playback. Okay, so they've added this. So it's not playing the audio, but it is showing you what these cards are going to look like. Plus, this is also going to give you a visual idea of how many cards have summon, cut in, playbacks to them. Although, only on that one screen. If one of these cards, interesting, I guess these have implemented dates, although that's kind of a weird way to depict it. Is that the 6th month and the 7th day, or the 6th day and the 7th month? Without the dividers, it's hard to tell. From this screen, can you play the summon, cut in, playback? Doesn't seem like you can. This is where it would be way more helpful to see the summon, cut in, playbacks play, though. Like, ideally, if you were trying to see how many cards had cool summon animations, although a cool summon animation is not going to win the game for you or do you any benefit in the game at all. Alright, so we can't see that. It almost certainly would be these cards that would have it, the ultra rares. Let's see, how many of these do we have? Well, I have a decent amount of these cards already, so I don't think I'd really consider that a good candidate for climax of the showdown. Dreaded Conspiracy was the new card one, so this one I should have basically nothing, and not really the way it's billing down now. I have so many cards now that pretty much any rare or normal card I have some, but all these ultra rares and super rares are empty, and so we're gonna have to probably change standards and really just look at the super rares and ultra rares. That definitely is a candidate. And this is a secret pack, which apparently I have a free pool for, and I don't know specifically why I have a free pool for it. We can see here there's lesser cards because it's a secret pack, but I am missing most of the super rares and ultra rares. So you do one free pull of this. Let's just start with that. These 3 new cards that are pickup cards. I've forgotten how this works. Is it the ones on the left that are from the Master Duel pool, or is it the ones on the right? I think it's the one on the right that are the exclusive to this pack. Well, not really exclusive to this pack, but in the pack. Yeah. What's funny about this secret pack is that this is using the final cards, the finale cards. They did spell castle correctly. I really don't have an eye. What happened there? It's final. How do I not have an eye? Labyrinth spelled 2 different ways. So this Dark Sanctuary seems to really synergize around spelling out final and winning the game when you spell out all of final. I don't have an F on it either. Interesting. So maybe there is a way to bring back that strategy and win. Although, it's still probably like a 5-turn win that's not as good. And this is just going to be awkward now. Like, no longer, I guess, do I need to click here, to click here, to click here. Alright, so this new secret pack, let's do a 10 pack here. And this is going to take a while, and I just want to save some time, so I'm going to go ahead and skip. And with that new secret pack, we've gotten a new card here, 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 and then a new card here, 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 and there. We've also unlocked the secret pack again and unlocked Guardians of Fire. So let's reevaluate and see if it's still a good candidate. Wait, that's not the one I wanted to. Featured cards. Here. We have like 1 ultra rare, so I think maybe another 10 pack would be justified. That being said, we are building up cards here to have 3 copies for final and some of these other cards that are rare. So 1 more 10 pack. Now we're finding new card packs. Now these other secret packs though almost certainly are not really worth it so much. And so we've got these new cards, then these new cards, then this new card, this new card. this new card, this new card, this new card, this new card. And just more copies of everything, and one new card here and one new card here. So that probably puts us in a pretty good position. It's not the perfect position. It's just going to get increasingly more difficult to get all the ultra rares from the secret pack in particular, where you're only getting 4 new cards from the featured cards, 4 cards from the featured card pool, which is what we're looking at now. But we've overshot 3 copies on pretty much everything otherwise as far as normal and rares, and so that's probably your best bet. Not worth it to go any further. This has 45 days in which I can invest more gems into it, so I could have also put that off. There are no other featured cards, so while there might be an argument to opening this one, since there are a couple neutrals, I probably don't have enough gold for it. And then a lot of these, there won't be a good argument at all. Pretty good argument on this one, too. But ideally, what you really want is you want to be able to open one of these packs, Dreaded Conspiracy in particular, and get the cards that way, instead of getting only 4 of the featured cards from the secret packs. This one's a pretty good candidate too. We still don't really know also what the next thing will be, or when the next thing to purchase will happen. So if I spend all the gems now, then next week I may not have enough gems for the next thing. That's a bad candidate. So whichever one it was, I think First Heroes might be a bit of a candidate to open some packs on, but we need to do probably 30 cards on Dreaded Conspiracy, because Dreaded Conspiracy has much more featured cards, and you're getting 8 cards in that category. The opening animation is still the same here, so you're just seeing slightly different art on the foil on the outside of these card packs. Let's go ahead and skip. So yeah, first pull, unsurprisingly, you have a lot of new things, and you're getting 3 or 4 copies of some cards just to start with, which may mean somehow it's not actually worth doing another pull on this. It's a rough decision. It should do at least another 10 packs, but because we've got some cards here obviously that we don't even have any copies of, but then we also have some cards here that are like 9 copies of things, and it may very well be a case that they've changed how the system works, and it only gives you a certain number of new cards per pack, and then it starts giving you duplicates of those new cards, which manipulating the odds like that would drastically change the value of spending 1,000 gems. And we found another card pack. As your 10 pack purchase contain no ultra rares, your next 10 pack pull will guarantee you at least 1 ultra rare. So this was new this time, this was new, this was new, this was new, and then a lot of old and multiples. This was new. See, this was new, and then all of a sudden we have 4 copies of it. This was new, this was new, this was new, and this was new. And so now we are basically forced, and this is why you always want some extra gems to open another 10 pack even if we didn't want to. And then we'll get 2 ultra rares from that. And yeah, another found secret pack. So this was new. 2 copies of the same ultra rare. Yeah, that does seem odd. That's new. And then basically nothing else is new. So I'd say now this pack is probably not a good candidate to go any further. The problem still, though, is the crafting system is just so terrible. Like, I should, at some point, maybe not 2 years into the game, but at some point I should be able to dissolve into crafting points the extra over 3 copies, because you can only ever have 3 copies in any one deck. I should be able to dissolve the normal cards into crafting points and use that to pay for crafting an ultra rare, and that's just not how this system is designed. Okay, so these 2 were the new secret packs, and almost certainly the answer is going to be no, just because we're low on gems. This isn't a terrible candidate to potentially do a 10 pack pull on. This isn't a terrible candidate either. But I think for the most part I'll just stay with having 2,000 just for safety. And all those card pulls were lucky because the legacy packs, we only had 2 of those anyways. Today we're potentially getting less of those. So on that aspect, now let's just go back to this point and let's dismantle all extra cards. And you can see of the extra cards we have, we're going to get 820 normal crafting points, so we could craft more normal cards. 630 rare crafting points, so we could craft more rare points, and only 10 super rare crafting points and 0 ultra rare, because we have no extra more than 3 copies of ultra rares at all. But they really need to just combine this by some factor. 4 to 1, 10 to 1, combine all these currencies into one. So even if I had to have some kind of conversion rate where it was 10 normal crafting points turns into 1 rare crafting points, which would mean 100 would then turn into 10, which would turn into 1 super rare points, which would mean 1,000 would turn into 100 would turn into 10 would turn into 1. So that would be a high conversion ratio, certainly, that I would really only get 3 ultra rare crafting points if I converted all 3,000 of my normal crafting points. But I'd like the ratio to be better, but something like that at least is creating a path to actually owning cards. Whereas right now the problem is getting to, like, if I select just normal rarity, let's see, rarity, normal, including forbidden, and we have this sorted by the number of cards we own. I have had so much extra crafting points for normal cards. You can see that the scroll bar here is well into the 80 or 90% category here. Like, And I could probably spend an extra hour and get this down even further. So at some point I am just going to have one of every normal card, and then it will be two of every normal card, and then it will be three of every normal card. And yeah, then crafting points for normal cards will be pretty useless until they actually add some new cards to this game, which, even though they added all of that stuff, this Dreaded Conspiracy is probably the only card expansion that's actually adding newer cards. 7/12/2023. Or maybe we're getting somewhat lucky and this is implementing some new cards too. 7/12/23. But notice here, it's been over a year, and this is the first point where they've even started to say, hey, we need a system to show that we're actually adding cards to the game. Whereas up until this point, it has really just been mostly focused on these Master Duel packs. And I guess they were trying to create... I don't know what kind of game they were trying to create there. It kind of abandoned the idea for a faster game in Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duels and to make a faster, more simplified game. So, Master Packs, in contrast to that, being earlier to that, are probably Yu-Gi-Oh! Trying to create, this is our legacy game, and this is going to eventually just fall into a solidified, never-changing experience where it just has all 10,000 plus cards from the old Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, but we're not going to try and make major changes. And yeah, I suppose, mark my words, if Rush Duel became super popular and sold way more than Yu-Gi-Oh!, they would never add new cards or expansions to Yu-Gi-Oh!, but they probably will always see some money in making more Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. In the same way, Magic the Gathering, even at its lowest points, can convince a lot of legacy players to still play it and buy new expansions and cards. In a lot of ways, these collectible card games and trading card games are a lot like comic books, in the sense that if the idea of a comic book existing can stay around forever, it doesn't matter if 10, 20, 30% of your audience gets bored of buying comics for a few years and then comes back to it. There's always somebody else to replace them, and just having the product available works for them. Let's see. Speaking of mark my words, Destiny 2 players have been ordered to pay $500,000 for harassing Bungie's developer. Why do I say speaking of mark my words? Because mark my words right now, this is a bad precedent. Increasingly, not knowing any of this story and just seeing the headline, my knee-jerk reaction here is that we're going to see precedents like this used so that companies can deny service and support, can make worse products with no fear of public ridicule. Harassment in general compared to free speech is always a delicate balance. And in the digital age, it's very easy to make claims about people or have third-party people be involved in a cancel culture type campaign and then blame an entire cancel culture campaign on one person, which seems like that's what the story is. The player began a targeted harassment campaign against a Bungie community manager and their family. Let's get into this. Dido because the studio chose to promote artwork created by a black fan during My Destiny 2 story community spotlight series. So the story is somebody was racist on the internet? Oh dear. Never heard that one before. It was a default judgment. Okay, so there's this Dido, Jane Doe, John Doe type person, fake name, pseudonym, that has been sued, and seemingly they did not file the paperwork or respond, and so they've gotten a default judgment against somebody who very possibly is not even in the United States, or not even really existing. So in a real way, this is probably Bungie wasting their funds and the money that they got from fans of playing games to put themselves in the right. They will almost certainly, in any case, never see a dime of this judgment. On the other hand, though, I can't really blame a video game company for siding with their employee, even if their employee may be a crazy SJW. Like, it probably is in the right direction for a company to say, you know what, we're going to protect our employee in the best way we can, which is by suing this person. Although, it seems weird now you're getting a $500,000 judgment. Is that going to the person harassed, or is that somehow going to lawyers hired by Bungie themselves? Apparently he left threatening and frightening voicemails, which, yeah, I guess that's pretty out there. But that is also a great example of where this should really not be a civil matter at this point. This should be a criminal matter. And unfortunately, the criminal system never works quite the way anybody ever wants it to in the United States, where prosecutors will not try to actually prosecute real criminals, and instead will go for easy targets and minorities often. People with minor drug offenses, kids. But yeah, there is perhaps an argument that prosecutors should be forced to prosecute things and not just protect their win ratio and gamify. They've completely gamified the idea of prosecution, where the prosecutor's entire career is based around, can they get a 100% conviction rate, when they should be getting at best a 50% conviction rate. It really. But there very possibly should be a case where if prosecutors are declining to prosecute, then there shouldn't be civil matters, or at least it should be argued in a court case that if a prosecutor declines to prosecute, then the civil case should be thrown out. Of course, leaving threatening and frightening voicemails might also very well fall under free speech. They say the situation ultimately required Bungie to take expensive measures to protect the Does from threat by... I suppose that's supposed to be the threat posed by Corner. So the Does, I think in this case, are actually the people being threatened. Interesting. So... yeah. overall, just skimming this article, though, they even say it here, this court ruling creates a path for studios to hold, I don't know what you would call stochastic, what that even means, accountable. But this is obviously creating a precedent where anybody who complains about anything, regardless of how legitimate and how cordial the discourse is going to be lumped in as being called a terrorist, which is exactly what they're saying here. Which I just don't believe that should be the definition there. If you're instilling terror into one person, you should not be called a terrorist. Otherwise, every criminal is a terrorist at that point. You have to intend to create mass terror, I think, to be justifiably called a terrorist. But yeah, anybody who complains about anything, and there is definitely an unfairness here, on top of it being a default judgment, so the person didn't even have a chance to defend themselves, in that Bungie wasted $500,000 of money, or felt they needed to spend $500,000 money, so they could investigate and give protection and spend legal fees against this person. So you can just like run up the bill and get a default judgment. There is also a problem I've heard about of fake process serving. So people get default judgments on them when they're out of the United States and they couldn't possibly have been served papers. Although I guess there probably is a legal way to serve papers outside of the United States for a United States court case, but it doesn't happen much. But yeah, process servers will just say they served papers and forge documents and get away with it at a more than reasonable rate of that, which could lead to why default judgments happen. Arguably, a default judgment has to kind of exist in the court system, but there's probably a better way to implement it. Perhaps it's a thing where a default judgment could be reversed on almost any grounds of challenge. It does seem like default judgments happen too easily, and that there's not an easy way to turn it around and say, hey, I actually wasn't served, I wasn't actually aware of this. Because I am, again, just skimming here for time's sake, but it does kind of seem like this person, they never really properly served this person or identified this person. Even on that, though, it seems like somebody was saying some things, and free speech probably should protect them. And this is definitely, I think, the next step, particularly in video games, of trying to have a slap lawsuit precedent made. Strategic lawsuits against public participation. Almost certainly, you would have, in this case, had the person actually responded, or could the person have actually responded, they would have almost certainly filed an anti-slap measurement counterclaim, saying that he's being sued because he's saying something in a public way. Although arguably making threatening phone calls, if that's true, that isn't in public communication. You only really hear about these stories, though. I only hear about these stories from video game companies, and very particularly a very small number of highly JW, we have a persecution complex companies. It's almost always Destiny and Call of Duty as companies promoting this idea that they have a super highly toxic fan base, where I imagine almost any large game company probably has a few crazy loon people. And that's exactly what this would have been in the old days, is you would have just taken these comments and blocked the person and gone, oh yeah, he's crazy, we know who he is, but he's effectively harmless, which that aspect is not really getting touched upon, is that plenty of people are posting nonsense on the internet. Very few of them have the ability or interest in actually following up on it. Like 9/11, to call back to 9/11 for a stupid reason, wasn't run by a bunch of people posting comments online or really communicating online at all. It was done by like skilled preparation and planning through cells, and all mostly done offline, I'm sure, so that they wouldn't be caught on a phone or an email or anything like that. So be afraid of the people who aren't spouting nonsense on the internet more than people who are. But yeah, I definitely am more afraid of the precedent that something like that's going to set, even just in the general consciousness of people. And that's part of the problem, certainly in the United States and law in general, is that people don't know the law. They can't possibly be expected to understand it. They only have their perception of the law. Most recently, there was the Supreme Court turning over or making a precedent that you could deny making a creative work if you were a website designer and somebody asked you to make a pro-gay website and you were anti-gay marriage. Would you legally be forced to not discriminate there and say and be forced to make something creatively that you didn't agree with? The Supreme Court said no. The problem with that court case has come out after the fact, in that there actually wasn't ever an instance which would have justified it being in front of the Supreme Court in the first place. It was a lot of the paperwork seems to have been straight up just made up, and the Supreme Court obviously wanted to vote a certain way, and they don't want to overturn themselves now. So people are upset about that a fictional scenario, which are not supposed to be heard by the Supreme Court. There needs to be a real damage or real threat of damage before they hear a case at the Supreme Court level. But anyways, my point there is not to cover that case as much as it is to say the perception of that case by many, many people in the United States of that ruling is that you can just now discriminate willy-nilly no matter what. And that's not what the ruling really says. It says if you're making a creative work, if you're making a website, you don't have to make something you don't believe in. In the same way, if you were a website maker, you wouldn't be forced to say to make it like a Nazi website for fear of discriminating against Nazism. Although I don't think Nazis would be a protected class, so you could discriminate against them anyways. But yeah, the perception of this default judgment by Bungie is now going to be amongst video game companies that they can sue anybody who criticizes or gives a negative review on their game, and every gamer now who has heard this story is going to potentially get a perception that they could be sued for $500,000 if they criticize or give a negative review, or if they're just angry at a game company. And yeah, That causes a chilling effect to free speech, and it also highlights the imbalance of powers here, in that companies that have millions of dollars to spend on court cases, or in this case, $500,000 or a little or less than that to spend on a court case, can silence people who very possibly can't afford a lawyer at all. Maybe that's why the default judgment happened. Moving on, Gematsu has an article. CMA delays its Microsoft Activision verdict as the FTC appeal gets denied. FTC has also said they're going to appeal the most recent verdict. I don't think this is that appeal, though. I think this was the initial preliminary injunction. The video game companies are doing a terrible job of talking about these court cases, and sadly we're talking about court cases left and right these days. But yeah, the United States FTC is going to appeal their preliminary injunction being denied. Meanwhile, the CMA is slowing down their process in the UK because they pretty much realize that if the FTC fails, then they're probably going to fail. It creates this weird situation where you have the United Kingdom's legal system and the United States legal system oddly interacting with each other, or at least echoing each other's moves, when they really should be completely separate systems and not make decisions based on different laws and in different countries. But I guess in a certain level, the law as perceived is almost just this not written down thought pattern in most people, even people working in the government. And so that what they think is the law or should be the law seems to be in line with what they think the United States law and the UK laws are. But yeah, it definitely seems like the Activision Blizzard merger is going to happen. People are upset with the FTC director. She has brought in lawsuits which were good but bad lawsuits, so it almost seems like she is intentionally making loser cases to set precedent, and it really wouldn't be the first time that some politically appointed person in charge of an organization like the Federal Trade Commission has been actively trying to sabotage the power of that commission. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised as this goes that the person in charge of the FTC now ends up being a lobbyist for in the future for some major corporation that her failed attempts at cases. But that's not really what it seems like. In this case, it seems more like she's just incompetent, or people under her are incompetent. The FTC in general, let's just say, seems like they're incompetent. And they're making bad filings. They waited too long and got yelled at by the judge for waiting too long. They have an internal judge, which is a weird system, to make decisions for their own appeals, which that is certainly weird. And their own kind of internal judge, who is a judge but is specifically picked and appointed for them, so you would think he would side more with the FTC, was fighting them, and they were just ignoring the findings there and in previous efforts. So yeah, just not good legal work on the FTC's part. Part of the problem certainly is that if the FTC wants to go against somebody, it would make a lot more sense to go against Google, Apple, Amazon, companies that are bigger but would have more lawyers and more money to fight you. But going against them and some of their monopolistic powers and the walled gardens of Apple on the App Store, for instance, would be a better argument to start with, and court case to start with, to make some precedent to use later on, instead of just trying to block mergers. Frankly, undoing some mergers would be helpful, like in the phone company industry or cable TV, things like that. Undoing perhaps some mergers in television and entertainment might not be a bad idea at the moment either. I don't think this is gonna work for me. And I guess, mark my words again, that this latest failure was probably enough of a success for Larry Hibbard, aka Major Nelson, to announce that he's going to depart Xbox, which I've been saying for weeks now. I'm not making this up. It felt like he was on his way out. It's felt like ever since the Xbox podcast introduced a new third mic female character, that, I mean, that's just basic radio stuff. Once you start to get somebody that's a third mic, changes are happening at that point, and somebody is on their way out. And particularly on the Xbox podcast, Major Nelson is an old guy, and it really didn't make a lot of sense that he would be hanging out doing a podcast with the two younger characters. But in general, he's just an old guy, so yeah, I've been saying for 6 months. I could have been right in that 6 months time. I could have also been wrong, and he could have stayed for another 10 years. That does create a danger, certainly. I guess we'll probably call this our last game for today. We really probably didn't make too much progress. We'll at least go check the daily quest and see if we've done well, and then redecide. Yep. It creates a dangerous precedent, certainly, though, with Larry Hibbard going away as the head of Xbox, that we are going to see an Activision Blizzard merger, and then somehow Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision Blizzard, becomes the new person in charge of Xbox in general, which, that's not something I really would want to see happen. That would be very bad for Xbox if that happened. I could see keeping Bobby Kotick around and just to avoid giving him a golden parachute and laying him off after like a year of the merger happening. But he does have enough political friends that he rubs elbows with that those political connections may be very valuable to avoid getting sued again. Although, noticeably, Bobby Kotick doesn't have enough political friends to run elbows with to stop the FTC from suing him right now. So he may not really be that valuable as far as his connections. He's on the board of several other companies, so he might be useful in potential mergers there. But that doesn't mean you make him in charge of Xbox in general. You probably would just keep him around until he was no longer useful. Bobby Kotick is old enough too that he could actually decide to want to just retire, or he could also leave Activision and still be on the board of several other companies. Speaking of things the FTC should probably move to block, Android has made a policy change to add blockchain support for Google Play app, which almost certainly this is opening up the door a little bit wider for just really garbage mobile games with blockchain technology, and we won't ever see a single game that would justify blockchain working. I don't think this is going into the blockchain part of cryptocurrency, though. I think this is at best NFTs. Apparently, Apple also allows NFTs on the App Store. And I suppose you could potentially make an app with blockchain technology that would work in a completely different system. I don't know if there's really a great reason for that, though. I could see somebody thinking it might be a good idea to make like a Pokemon game where each Pokemon is unique and encrypted on the blockchain, so you're trading that one unique Pokemon like character. But overall, I think that's probably just a waste of time. Okay. Destroy a card. Activate 2 more spell cards. Normal summon a card. And duel in solo mode. I feel like I may have missed the duel in solo mode last month, but that would have been 14 days ago, so far too late to worry about that now. Let's see if we can play one more game. We are making decent progress here. 4 more wins to gold tier 1, then 4 more wins after that point. Telltale, the new Telltale, labeling himself as the real Telltale. I don't believe that is accurate, but it's also probably not legally defining what the real of anything is promoting the Expanse some more. And weirdly, they seem like they're promoting the Expanse through, I think they're one of these companies that's going back to Reddit. They're also promoting Sam and Max Telltale games. Yeah, here we go. r/gaming AMA. And so I'm thinking this Reddit protest, if I was to guess, has created this secondary effect where Reddit has just kicked out a percentage of the mods. Let's say, just to pick a number, 30% of mods have been kicked out. But potentially, I would say a lot of those mods were running the biggest subreddits like r/gaming. And we are now basically back to everything seeming like it's exactly the same. There definitely aren't any more posts talking about a Reddit blackout or anything else, but yeah, on the surface level, under this censored regime of Reddit 2.0, I guess is what we could call it, everything seems to be right. Like, all the trains are running on time in fascist Italy, effectively. But the secondary effect there seems to be, now that they have new mods running things like r/gaming, they seem to be inviting and encouraging more people like Telltale to do AMAs, and so there seems to be some slightly new blood in that case also. Whereas I feel like r/gaming very well may have never let Telltale in the past do an AMA, just as a self-promotion thing. Because technically self-promotion is also not something you're supposed to be able to do on most subreddits, if not Reddit itself, and yet a big company like Telltale is being actively encouraged to do that. I didn't even have an accountability section for today. I'm still playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I haven't had any more random crash to desktops after like the first episode, but boy, have I had to mess with settings. Like, The audio dynamic range, I had to lower that down. It actually sounds really bad when you set it to high on my headphones. Really quiet and just worse quality audio. There's too many settings to adjust for in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And then there's just an obsession with ray tracing, which makes the entire game incredibly dark. There's about 3 obsessions in Shadow of the Tomb Raider that are pretty obvious, in that they want you to pull a predator for a large amount of the game, in the sense that they want you to cover yourself in mud, so then you have kind of an ugly texture to start off with of Lara Croft. I don't think the visuals look as good as it did in the second game. But they want you then to cover that ugly texture with mud, and then they want you to hide against leaves in the mud so you can't see yourself even more. Now that I've set myself up to have a checking where I look at videos after they're recorded, it looks even darker at that point. It is pretty crazy just how dark it is and uninterested they are. And that directly contradicts the second obsession, which is to have a bunch of different outfits and RPG armor-like elements. This is gonna suck if this does damage to me at the end of the turn. Wow. I should have activated this and destroyed that. That was stupid of me. But yeah. Trying to actually have an experience around Shadow of the Tomb Raider is just constantly getting messed up by the incredible obsession with ray tracing, which doesn't really even make the game look that good, and the darkness. The controls seem like they're wonky, maybe even wonkier than the second game. There is a nice sequence where you fall asleep and then go back in time and play as a, like, I would say 12-year-old Lara Croft in Croft Manor. You don't really get to run around Croft Manor too much as you're just running around the outside of it. And they definitely have just over-teased the idea of being in Croft Manor throughout the series of Tomb Raider, with there being only a couple of sequences in which you were in Croft Manor. The way it's depicted is this just giant mansion really makes it feel like there should be secret passages, and that you could have an entire Resident Evil style game where you were inside of Croft Manor for a large amount of it. Or Croft Manor could have been your central hub to memories of other adventures, which part of that sequence just really highlights that it seems like your father did a whole bunch of adventures, and in the Tomb Raider reboot, Lara Croft basically had one adventure forced upon herself in the first game, and then in the second game just becomes this avenging angel trying to kill Trinity and nothing else. So that they've skipped over things, and they've, even in Shadow of Tomb Raider, they say she's about in her 20s, so she's just not old enough as a character to be at the end of the world. Now there is a heavy indication that I suspect will happen of time travel, so I suspect they may try and set it up in a way that that you go back in time and reset things for Lara Croft, and then there's going to be a different game series potentially around. a rebooted universe Lara Croft. But you also run into major problems with playing as a little girl Lara Croft, in that she's all alone, and it feels like there should be some other kids, and that they should be having a tea party while she's running around climbing on jungle gyms and just kind of goofing around. You could potentially put like the iconic dual guns on like a toy belt, and they could be sport guns. But you're definitely not getting the green tank top and the hot pants. That really wouldn't be appropriate. You could try to make a kid appropriate version of that, but her being British in particular also has her in like a skirt, which, yeah, that would be accurate, I suppose. And just like a t-shirt. But there's nothing iconic. And there really is just not any characterization around Lara Croft in the first place. And that's the other problem that comes about all of this, is that Lara Croft as a character doesn't really have a personality. Not in the reboot series. And she's just kind of a femme fatale butt kicker, is what I generally would know of her. As somebody who has not been able, because it's just not really it's not really possible to tolerate playing the old Tomb Raider games. I haven't been able to play any of the old Tomb Raider games, but yeah. So I don't feel like there's really a personality there, and even the Tomb Raider Angelina Jolie movie didn't make it seem like there was much of a personality there. She doesn't have like anybody she really cares for, any romance, really any job other than just being an adventurer. In the first game of the rebooted series, they tried to they tried to make Sam like the best friend, but I don't think that really matters, because she really was just a Sam was really just a damsel in distress. And in the Shadow of the Tomb Raider, they try to make Jonah like the best friend, but really there's no reason for him to be there. And then they run into the problem, whereas Jonah is just too physically big and too capable to be the co-op companion, the short round equivalent for Lara Croft. It really makes no sense that it isn't Jonah running around shooting people and stealth killing people and solving all the Tomb Raider puzzles. There are more tombs in Shadow of the Tomb Raider than the first game, but it doesn't feel like there's quite enough even at that. And the tombs in the entire level design is incredibly linear, and it's going around in wide perimeters of the map, so that there's just giant middle sections of nothing on the map. Obviously they're trying to imply that it's a much bigger landmass than it really is, when it is just a tunnel that is really 10 feet wide and several kilometers long, relatively speaking in sizes. But yeah, I don't know what you do with the little girl Lara Croft. Maybe you have a flashback. I'm kind of hoping maybe they have a flashback of her as a little girl, and then they could have another flashback of her as more of a teenager, and then you could have a flashback as more of a young adult. But even if you go that route, the kinds of adventures she would have to go on would have to basically not be adventures, because that first rebooted game was supposed to be her real taste of adventure as Lara Croft. Like, the Tomb Raider title should not exist before that first game. Right. Hope this works. I guess I should never put link monsters in the banished pile because my other card can benefit from link monsters. Right. $100 life left. I really wonder if the Tomb Raider series wouldn't have been better if it was more of an annualized series where there's just trying to do an adventure that doesn't really have that big of stakes. Even like the Indiana Jones movie series might have been better if it was more annualized but smaller stakes. The Ark of the Covenant being the first item they found, maybe you set precedent there as a big stake, but then maybe you, in the next movie, just look for something that is just an artifact. Maybe it's a little bit magical. And I guess that is the case with Temple of Doom, is that the Stones of Shiva really were only going to restore a single village and free a single village. It wasn't going to end the world. And even in The Last Crusade, the Cup of Christ is only going to possibly keep Hitler alive forever, which might change things if the Nazis had gotten it and been able to use it. Whereas Shadow of the Tomb Raider is literally starting the apocalypse and destroying the world, is the implications there. And even the first Tomb Raider rebooted series felt like it was going to release a demon goddess of some sort and potentially destroy the world. The Tomb Raider series, I think, has got the stakes far too high. Where a shorter annualized series, kind of like how Hitman had done it, might have made some sense. Although Hitman itself also has some problems in that I just don't think you can actually have an annualized series. But maybe they could have made 2 years of made a new game every 2 years. There's also a major problem in Tomb Raider that there are some very nice looking vistas that you can easily just run by and miss visually. So they're kind of wasting their art talent there, and they're just not really focused on having you look at the scenery in Tomb Raider, which mostly has you running around. When you spend more time in an area, you're mostly running around the ugly parts of the maps where there's just a bunch of hiding spots, and it's more enclosed areas with high levels of canopy or actual roofs over you. Guess they didn't see that coming. The whole game, as far as the pacing in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, is really broken in that there's a lot of documents you can pick up, and then you have to hit the back button to hear Laura read it. But if you don't hit the back button, you're going to basically never be able to find the thing you just picked up and read it yourself. And a lot of times that is happening right after you fought some people, and then you're supposed to move to the next area and fight some other people. That should be good enough. We didn't destroy 4 cards, but yeah, you're constantly on this herky-jerky stop and start pattern, which, interesting, they moved Duel Live over here. So can you see Duel Live as an advertisement? Yes. But they have just added it as its own thing. Still nothing in the gift box. I've never seen that used. Um, but yeah, the game flow pacing is pretty terrible. Where there is a slow hunting mechanic that's probably too slow, and there is a lot of OCD collectathon stuff where you're supposed to run around and collect resources. I've somewhere around 30% of the way through the game, I suspect, and I've already started to max out my resources just as I've gotten to the first merchant where I can actually sell resources. And it does definitely seem like more often than not, but in part because I have the DLC pay to win costume outfit on, I'm going to just have way too much resources that I'll just sell for gold, that I'll just buy guns and equipment from the merchant, which is just yet another gameplay mechanic that Tomb Raider really doesn't need. I think a simplified, hey, this is an old game, we're going to live up to that old simplified gameplay concept of you're going to be in tombs, you're going to 3D platform in tombs. That kind of 3D platforming you're doing now in Shadow of the Tomb Raider is not quite the same as old 3D platforming, but it's probably better. Although it does have a major problem in that sometimes it's very difficult to see where to go and what to do, and you would have really not had that much of a problem with a less visually detailed game of the older generations. But yeah, just climbing and running in tombs, just dual gun shooting enemies, and having a few cutscenes in between would have been what an old Tomb Raider game is in my mind. Whereas a new Tomb Raider game is find the open world, the kind of open world, but actually rather small hunting areas, hunt animals, collect herbs, collect wood, collect oil, collect fat, collect feathers, look for campfires so you can fast travel back to this section, look for challenge tombs, look for regular tombs, look for supply caches, look for salvage, all of that OCD collectathon stuff, it happens in the hunting area. Then you get to more linear areas where it's do maybe an action cutscene running from point A to point B, or just walk from point A to point B and very little happens. Then get into a fighting section where it's stealth kill a bunch of people. The XP system seems to be insane on the stealth kill, because at one point I headshotted the last person in a fight encounter and it gave me 185 XP, whereas every other stealth kill gives you somewhere around 30 to 40 XP. So I thought, oh, well, maybe this game is really just really trying to push you to shoot guns instead of stealth killing with the hiking axes or a bow and arrow. So then I headshot with the exact same gun somebody and got 35 XP. And there's just no explanation as to why I got 185 XP. I assume I got 150 for clearing the area. You will just walk into areas and it will give you XP for walking into an area. And the fact that you're having XP at all is just kind of crazy. The fact that you're not just getting skills as you move the story forward or as you collect tombs is crazy. But you do get some skills from collecting tombs, so it's just two different systems. There's way too many systems before they even added DLC costumes and DLC weapons and weapon upgrades. I feel like maybe the first Tomb Raider game had a decent balance as far as those features, but they've totally broken it by the third game. It's just way too much. Anyways, we're going to have to hurry to get to the news. So I'll say with very little comment here. Here we have somebody claiming to be doing an Ada Wong cosplay in a nurse outfit, which an Asian person with an Asian lady with black hair in red does not make Ada Wong. I do not believe there ever was a nurse outfit canonically in Resident Evil. If there was, it must have been some kind of special costume. So this is one of those. cases where I think they are way, way off on the cosplay and really just trying to use hashtags. I haven't heard anybody say anything about threads this week, which may be a bad indicator for threads. Also, really haven't heard anybody say anything terrible about Twitter this week, which may be good for Twitter. But yeah, as Major Nelson is trying to comment to people on Twitter, he did say he is potentially still going to be on Twitter and still talking to people. Apparently, yet another actor claims something is breaking an announcement, I guess, or claiming to break an announcement, saying he's playing the main character in Call of Duty 2024. It will reportedly be a new Black Ops game set during the Gulf War. Which, okay. I don't know what that really helps any gamer know. I don't think Call of Duty fans really care which war a game is set in. Perhaps they have maybe an aversion that they don't want a Call of Duty set in World War II if they've just recently played a Call of Duty set in World War II. I don't think they really care who the main character is in the story mode of Call of Duty, since almost everybody playing Call of Duty is playing it for the multiplayer anyways. Here's that story I was talking about before. The FTC is going to appeal its loss against the Microsoft in the Activision Blizzard case. Which, yeah. I said in the last stream there probably would have been two ways this could go. They could either appeal the preliminary injunction, or they could move forward to the rest of the case, because I don't think the denial of the preliminary injunction alone would have led to what would have probably been described as a summarily judged. I can't pronounce it, can I? A summary judgment of the entire case. So because they're appealing this, they are, I think, hoping to get a faster turnaround to potentially still screw up the Activision Blizzard merger, so that then Microsoft would have to pay like $3 billion to Activision Blizzard. Which, yeah, that was one of the complaints that the judge had against the FTC, is it seems like they are dragging their feet to just make Microsoft pay the breakup fee that they agreed to pay if the deal was not done. Which, that's really not what the FTC should be doing. They shouldn't be potentially trying to put pressure on Microsoft to maybe agree to something else by dragging their feet or something like that. If they hadn't appealed this preliminary injunction, then I imagine the merger would go through, and it could always be undone. And particularly in this case, since there has been a lot of concessions Microsoft has made as far as keeping Activision Blizzard separate as a separate entity from Microsoft for like 10 years. That's, I think, part of the 10-year deal there, that at any point Microsoft could lose the overall case and be forced to undo the merging, and it would be fairly easy to do at that point. Microsoft would claim it would be hard always, but it wouldn't actually be as difficult. There's a big difference if the merger went through and like Microsoft laid off all the Activision Blizzard employees and shut down all the offices and sold all the building leases and things like that, versus if Microsoft has already said that for 10 years they're going to keep the same offices, keep the same employees for the most part, keep the same building leases. But yeah, I do believe appeals sometimes get responded to faster than the regular cases, and so by appealing, I think they still are trying to rush against the clock of that. I think it's Is it July 18th? Yeah, that would only be 4 days from now. I think it might be September 18th or something. I know it's an 18th. Is the breakup day. See, Video Games Chronicle has this feature that says Inside 84, Tokyo's secret Nintendo bar needs your help. Owned by former Nintendo developer 84, hosts an incredible collection of items. Why does it need people outside of Japan's help? I don't know. This definitely seems like this is one of these like Japanese bars that barely have any licenses or barely exist at all. This is really a good excuse for them just to show off their Nintendo collection, of which I will say, since this is mostly Nintendo memorabilia and Nintendo items, there's a decent variety here. Let's look at some of these pictures in more detail. First of all, you're having hand-drawn art potentially from people who actually worked at Nintendo, signed copies of Breath of the Wild, Japanese versions. So yeah, we can get bigger pictures of this. Yeah, you have a Game Boy. Some of this obviously is priceless as far as the hand-drawn art. Weird that they're all different picture frames, but okay, that's the style. Here looks like somebody assigned a score to a Nintendo game, and that's been framed too. Putting art behind glass in a picture frame is a pretty good way to protect it if you can't get to more museum quality stuff. Here we have some Yoshi plates. Interesting, a PlayStation 2, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3 games also on display. These very possibly are uniforms and outfits that are from Nintendo employees. A decent amount of toys here that may not have any equivalent to what would be in the West. Here you have a Famicom looking controller. Might be a toy of the version of the controller. Space Channel 5 stuff, Kirby stuff. This robot game, that was an interesting little game when it came out. Here you have a signed Famicom copy of what looks like probably one of the Final Fantasy things. This is a weird, it's got to be a Nintendo 64 or GameCube accessibility controller, but I've never seen it. There's something here called the glove. I guess that's what this is. It's a Nintendo 64 attempt at something like a Power Glove. I've never even seen that. Yeah, I have no idea who this person is. It seems to be a re-release of Game & Watch game. Here's a Famicom. Here's a Rob the Robot, which I don't think... I think that was originally released in the West, and then when they've have they been eventually ported. There's several earrings and jewelry pieces over here. This is probably a Nintendo 64, no, GameCube. This would have been a GameCube development kit. Look how big it is compared to what the GameCube really was, how small that device was. Collection of Game Boys here. Collection of other kinds of toys that I bet Nintendo may have sold or licensed, Nintendo license. Several playing cards. I don't know if any of those are actually Hanafuda cards, though. Man, that is a nice collection. Yeah, and almost certainly having this as a bar is just like part of the weirdness of each Japanese tiny little bar needs to stand out. I think we've gone in circles there. Um, Whereas clearly this should be in a museum. It seems like they've got a English translation here of who signed what for all the things on the wall. This length of the wall is almost certainly about the length of the bar. The bar probably only holds 8 or 9 people, but a lot of Japanese bars do that, and you just have your regular that comes there every day and drinks and spends several $100s, or at least $100 in alcohol every day, and that makes you enough money to stay in business because you're just one person running a bar. Um, it's kind of an interesting idea, the whole Japanese bar concept, in that somebody can just own a bar, and that can be the business they own, and they can survive off the profits of that. Whereas late stage capitalism in general has pushed more and more towards the idea that no, you have to be an employee of a big business, and the big business has to make billions of dollars and have thousands of employees for even the lowest employee to be paid enough to barely survive. And most employees don't own a business or a part of a business at all. Um, there's a lot of foreigners in the bar, but I imagine it probably does get some major. It seems like the entirety of this feature is that it's promoting a place that has a secret location, which is not saying much. I imagine if you asked anybody on the streets of Tokyo, do you know where 84 Hashi is? Um, the bar, uh, bar 84, you could probably find it. And there very possibly is something in the name as far as where 84 is probably where it is. Not just like street number 84, but there's probably a street that is pronounced as Hashi. Or 84 Hashi might be the name. So perhaps not relevant news at the moment, but a nice look at a collection there. Apparently, Sony is reportedly boosting PlayStation's R&D development to drive its live service push. So expect to see more live services in Sony PlayStation. A Gex trilogy has been announced for modern consoles and PC. The Gex games are coming to Nintendo Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and Steam. A lot of people have talked about Gex almost as a joke in the past. It'll be interesting to see if the Gex trilogy is actually playable in modern times. I suspect it might be a lot like the Crash Bandicoot remakes, re-releases, remasters, in that if you don't have nostalgia for these games, if you haven't played them in the past, you probably won't want to play them now. And that's certainly why I went to it. I wanted to mention this. My favorite lewd anime waifu game, Destiny Child, with which they're using Davy, which is like the one young character that isn't in lewd outfits, is doing some major bonus coupons for the summer, giving you a massive amount of their blood gem currency, which is extremely valuable. Like, they gave away like 600 blood gems. There's all these different codes you put into the coupon codes for rewards. So now is really a great time to jump into Destiny Child if you like a gacha game that hopefully you have enough restraint to not actually put a lot of money into it. Otherwise, it's going to let you put hundreds of dollars a month into it. But if you like collecting anime waifu characters, the kind of art you can expect here is definitely more aligned this, and it uses live 2D, so these characters will jiggle back and forth. Like this coupon code, Seaside View, I believe, is the one that gave 600 blood gems. And then if it wasn't that one, then it was this coupon code Oceanic. And here's another example of anime waifu characters. I talk about Destiny Child a lot, and yeah, it is probably what's showing it off. Although I haven't really suggested in the past people jumping into it, it is probably one of the best mobile games. If you just want something where you have daily quests and you can grind on it and not pay attention, it allows you to automate almost every action, so you spend maybe an hour a day doing what could have been several hours. Davy as a character is the little sister character in it, although currently in the story, Davy and Mona and Lisa, which are all puns, Mona, Lisa, and Davy as Da Vinci, like all those main helper assistant characters are out of the story anyways. So you will see Davy in like the summoning animation, but she doesn't actually show up in the current story as far as new story being added. She shows up in the old story as the bratty little sister that you kind of love to hate. Moving on to probably more mainstream news. Apparently an enhanced version of The Last of Us 2 is in the works, says the composer. Reportedly the composer says, man, that is a rumor on the rumor. There. An enhanced version of Last of Us 2 probably doesn't change the story of Last of Us 2, so it probably doesn't fix a lot of problems there. One of the things that I find somewhat irritating about Shadow of the Tomb Raider is that some of the visual accessibility elements in Last of Us 2 probably should be in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, because there is like a survival instincts mode to highlight things, and I kind of just need for accessibility for that to always be on, instead of having to click right click, hear an annoying sound effect every time I click it, and then have a cooldown timer. But yeah, and the Shadow of the Tomb Raider is crazy anyways, because survival instincts will show you everything on the screen and is built from this idea of this is an accessibility feature with people with poor eyesight. And then they also have a function where you can turn it into a hard mode difficulty and not use survival instincts, and then you have to use crafting resources to make a perception medicine that will highlight some things but not everything until you level it up, but it just highlights the same things. So why use resources when you can just use survival instincts and lower the difficulty, which there's, I'm pretty sure, no achievements around the difficulty, because the difficulty is basically a grid of 3x3 different settings, and even that grid of difficulty settings is not done well. It really should be much more a toggle switch for about 12 different items, because changing the difficulty on one setting affects 3 or 4 different separate actions and abilities. Moving on. I don't know why I clicked on this. Oink Games announces an RPG called Sopho and the Moon Warriors for Switch and PC. I think I must have clicked on this on accident. That's not big news. Here we have not Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy are not really video game characters, although Arkham Asylum basically did establish this outfit. Here I wanted to point out the photography here is blown out. There's like way too much red light in the background. Either this was added digitally or this actually had a light there, and I think that was a problem. And this is not accurate on any Harley Quinn outfit I've seen. It seems like it's just a probably handmade leather skirt and outfit, but there's too much black and not enough red for the visual theme of what you're going with as far as Harley Quinn. And there's even like black in the hair, which doesn't really make a good amount of sense. I would say they've done a good job on the stockings because it's probably very hard to get a diamond pattern to be lined up correctly on stockings or sewn on stockings in the first place. But then you have some odd perception here. And is this supposed to be a baseball bat? Because it kind of looks just like a stick. Yeah, it looks more like a stick than a baseball bat to me. In a lot of these photographs, it would make a lot more sense to just have the face or the bust and above the waist have more photos. Although maybe they do have more photos and they're selling those on their OnlyFans. Okay. So here's the big story. We've talked about it from Windows Central. Larry Herb, Hyrb, aka Major Nelson, is stepping down after 20 years with Xbox. This is ground control the Major. He's stepping through the door. They're quoting here Major Tom song. Let's see. After 20 incredible years, I have decided to step back and work on the next chapter of my career. As I take a moment and think about what we have done together, I want to thank the millions of gamers around the world who have included me as part of their lives. Also, thanks to Xbox team members for trusting me to have a direct dialogue with our customers. The future is bright for Xbox, and as a gamer, I am excited to see the evolution. Thank you, and I'll see you online. So, the thing you take from this, this is a kind of nicely professional photo, but no tie, and honestly, I don't think this is probably the best haircut he could afford, or the best suit he could afford, but much better than we've seen most as far as photos of people in charge of video game companies. The big question here is he stepping down from Xbox to be the next vice president, or in some way other member of the board of Microsoft, which would be actually probably pretty good. Microsoft outside of Xbox has done pretty poorly with Windows 11, Windows 12. The push for Azure server things is not, I think, as successful as they would really like for it to be. Streaming services and streaming gaming, all of that hasn't really succeeded greatly. Like Microsoft tried to do Mixer and that kind of failed. I don't know if that really was an Xbox effort. I don't think it was. So, and it probably would be a step down for Major Nelson if he became the new person in charge of Mixer or some kind of service like that. So yeah, it would be a good step up if he was the new vice president or even president of Microsoft, and then Microsoft overall would have more of a central focus around, we're going to make Windows more of a gaming platform and less of a OneDrive advertisement or Microsoft Edge browser advertisement. We've seen multiple shifts in power at Microsoft as they transition from focusing on one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and very often nobody cares about any of the things they're trying to promote. Or are we going to see Major Nelson go to a completely different company, form another company, or straight up just move to a different industry at a different company? We did see that the Nintendo of America president a few years ago kind of got out of video gaming and was on the board of, I think, like Pizza Hut or something, but he's pretty much disappeared as far as the old Nintendo of America president. And Doug Bowser, the new Nintendo of America president, hasn't really done anything amazing either. Although in those two cases, the president of Nintendo of America is really just a puppet for Nintendo of Japan anyways, whereas Major Nelson was actually making decisions. Has he made great decisions? I think part of this lawsuit really is highlighting to his detractors that he hasn't made great decisions and probably is justified to be asked to leave in favor of somebody who maybe can make my Xbox sell better in places like Japan or just in the West in general, instead of being this far in third position. Um, was Major Nelson the person who was pushing for an all digital future and always all online DRM? Or was that somebody else in Xbox? It may have been him. So maybe somebody new in charge would do something different. And honestly, his job, as I understand it, is probably to orchestrate all of the developers and all of the sub companies under Xbox, all the different teams. And on that aspect, he has been way too hands off, and that's where you get something like Redfall. And I wouldn't be surprised if he is being asked to leave because of the failure of Redfall more than anything else. Or maybe he's leaving because of his perception that he's going to succeed with the Activision Blizzard merger. Take your pick. But yeah, personally, I don't think he has done a good job coordinating and organizing, and frankly, he needed to be restructuring all of these development companies. It is ridiculous that they own so many different companies, and each of those companies seems to have an aspect of management and upper management, middle management, and publishers, in the case of Bethesda, that just should not exist. Where if I was Major Nelson, as soon as we acquired Bethesda, there should have been some re-interviewing of people. There should have been getting to know you meetings. That there should have been some evaluations, and maybe 6 months or a year later, you start to say, "Hey, this manager here at Bethesda is really just a middleman, and we don't need them. We either need to take the upper management team of Bethesda and merge it into a unified management team that covers all of the developers and all the different offices, or we need to get rid of people." And perhaps you just merge a bunch of people to start with, and then you have a very bloated management team that's just handling everything, and then you eventually find who's the problem employee managers and get rid of them, or who's the redundant employee managers and get rid of them. But Major Nelson hasn't really done any of that. He seems to very much have acted on the idea that all we have to do is sign the paper and acquire a company, and then the company can just be left alone, and that will be financially viable, when a company really wouldn't have been for sale if that was financially viable. So yeah, I've also heard that some of these GDPR prompts have changed as far as the EU, whereas previously you had to click, you didn't have to click something for them to collect your information. You just had to present a button that says, "Don't collect my information." Now you have to actually click something to collect your information, which they are now increasingly having these giant sign me up brightly colored buttons and then hiding a cancel button somewhere else. And that's just for general websites. The EU also has made it official that starting in 2027, all cell phones, will have to have replaceable batteries, which it's 2023 now, so you're going to probably go through at least one or two phones, even if you're being extremely conservative until we get to that point. But hopefully phone companies will start to potentially do that. I really would love to get back to the point where I could just swap the batteries on a phone. My phone right now's batteries probably close to being shot after a year, and I didn't see any great sales during Amazon Prime Day. This year's Prime Day was actually very conservative for me. Either I did a much better job shopping, or they just had better deals, and I wasn't looking at garbage lightning deals that didn't matter. So I ended up spending a lot because I was needing to replace things like a ceiling fan. So you buy a ceiling fan, that's $200 out the window at the start with. But I didn't buy a bunch of ridiculous things, and I didn't buy things for other people as far as like Christmas gifts. Uh, so I felt much better about how much and what I was spending on this Prime Day sale. I've lost my train of thought as why I was talking about Prime Day. Yeah. But yeah, cell phones I was talking about. I didn't see any cell phones on sale during the Prime Day sale. And potentially I should buy a new cell phone. I also need to buy a new tablet, but I'm having a hard time justifying the price, and I need to find one that has actual support for micro SD cards at a high scale. I may end up getting like a refurbed tablet instead. Moving on. NIS America wanted to remind people that God Wars: The Complete Legend Nintendo Switch will be removed from eShop on 8/30, in case you wanted to play God Wars: The Complete Legend. I don't know why it's being removed, but it's probably worth repeating the warning. Here we have Major Nelson at what is probably several years younger at an Xbox event. You gotta know it's younger because you can see that this microphone logo here for Xbox is a much older Xbox logo. That this would have been either Xbox One or Xbox 360 or even the original Xbox. Again, he's tweeting 1 of 3 as he tweets. Phil Spencer also commented, thanking him for being a friend, for everything you've done to the Xbox community and team. If you look at the timing, though, and if I'm right about him starting to think about retiring or stepping down 6 months ago, due to the third mic being added to the Xbox podcast, which really, if you want the exact timeline, just go see when you started to see guests show up more often on the Xbox podcast. That's probably the beginning of it. He may very well have decided to leave even before Redfall was released, which is believable. I mean, he's just old, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's figured out that he can't go any higher at Microsoft, and he's just going to retire, form his own company. Let's theory craft a little bit here. Can Major Nelson get enough connections and support that he could start a new video game company with a new console and compete with Microsoft? He probably has a non-compete, but let's say he gets around that. Could he get the funding to acquire companies? No, not really. I could see him being the new person in charge of Embracer Group. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense, because it does seem like the current people in charge of Embracer Group are somewhat dropping the ball and losing interest. So if all of a sudden we saw he's the new president of Embracer Group, then he would effectively have a publishing company. Would the Embracer Group make their own hardware and console? No. I think that's too much of a stretch to believe. But I wouldn't be surprised if Major Nelson was in charge of Embracer Group. I would have said he might have been in charge of something smaller like Gearbox, but since Embracer Group already owns Gearbox, that won't happen. Could he be the new person in charge of EA? Yes, I haven't really seen any indication that we'd lose somebody in EA. Could he be the new person in charge of Ubisoft? Yes, but he would have to move to France for that one. So yeah, he could be Embracer Group, he could be Ubisoft, he could be EA. I could think any of those big publishers might hire him as as an employee, as probably the person in charge. Embracer Group makes a lot of sense since that's all Major Nelson has been doing, has been acquiring and merging companies, and that seems to be the desire of Embracer Group. It's in the name. On the other hand, he could just end up working for a completely different industry. Pizza Hut, Papa John's, Toys R Us, any of that might make some sense, although you would tend to think he would work for a technology company. Could we see Elon Musk step down from Twitter and him being in charge? It's a wild speculation, but it's believable. Could you see Facebook getting rid of Mark Zuckerberg and him being in charge of Facebook? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually, because Meta as a company has that VR, they have that gaming initiative, and they could do very well in that direction. Could he be in charge of Amazon.com? Sure. There's definitely a idea there too, in that there's been a lot of controversies around Jeff Bezos, and I don't think he particularly is super loved at Amazon. So yeah, there's a lot of theory crafting and speculation as far as where Major Nelson could go elsewhere, if he is going to go elsewhere. He may just retire. Here we have Elizabeth in Bioshock Infinity, in halfway in her blue outfit. As far as a cosplay, we really need to hurry. It's already been 2 hours. It does take some sewing, certainly, to make a bodice or a corset like this, and felt outfits, but there's just not a lot of detail here. You've got some sleeves, you've got an underskirt and a skirt, and you've got some lines. It looks like there was probably a decent amount of sewing here. Necklace and hair and makeup all looks fine. The set dressing on this photograph is fine, although I would say the framing seems ridiculously poor, and just how high the walls go. Interesting kind of shadow from a staircase here. General boots, I don't believe she was just wearing boots in Bioshock Infinite, and definitely they're kind of going a little lewd with the skirt being lifted up, but this is almost Victorian in how it is being done as a boudoir thing. The main problem with this, though, is this is just not the way you would expect Elizabeth. They're hashtagging lingerie. I don't really think this falls under lingerie. You're seeing maybe the top of the stocking here, and that's it. It's just not a particularly good outfit for Elizabeth, and in particular, I have not seen a lot of people try to cosplay Elizabeth because of that, is in that they never made her, put her in an interesting outfit compared to the main protagonist of Bioshock Infinite, who has a much more interesting outfit in that he has a gun and he just way more designed, and you don't even see the main protagonist that you play as very often in Bioshock Infinite, but when you do see him, he does visually stand out a lot more. Let's see. This one of 3 here was 4 hours ago, and it's a pinned tweet. Let's see if we could get the 2 of 3. Also, thanks to Xbox team members for trusting me to direct dialogue with our customers. The future is bright for Xbox, and as a gamer, I am excited to see the evolution. Thanks, and I'll see you online. 2 of 3. P.S. The official Xbox podcast will be taking a hiatus this summer and will come back in a new format. Yeah. So, yeah. Xbox podcast taking a real plane there. that is the one reason, I guess, to watch official podcasts like the Xbox podcast compared to watching something like Giant Bomb, where you're not likely to get that much breaking news or even accurate news on the Giant Bombcast these days, in my opinion. Uh, but even Giant Bomb, when they do their E3 and have other game developers come on and talk, there is some value in that. But then a lot of podcasts, video game podcasts, are absolutely worthless. It's just people repeating news, and I say this ironically because that's what I'm doing right now, but it mostly is people repeating news, adding in their own opinions that really don't have much of a basis, or even really much. The people giving the opinions aren't experienced enough or intelligent enough to be making an opinion, which again, ironically, might include me. But yeah, an official Jim Ryan is on a podcast would be worth listening to. A I Love PlayStation or PS I Love You as a podcast talking about PlayStation, usually not worth listening to, even though they have broken some things in the past. Very rarely, though, do podcasts break anything of any use, and often it is just somebody saying something off the cuff that is either being misquoted or misremembered and has no real value. Anyways, I guess the criticism as far as AI assisted content is still the main thing with Cyan, since they've have this pinned since June 8th. It's not even why I clicked on this though. 4 hours ago they said they have put out the YouTube video for the state of Cyan. In that they give you a first look at a redacted game. I assume that is Riven Remake. Let's see. Here we have a character I'm not really familiar with, a Dragon Age cosplay character. A interesting design as far as the costume. Real leatherwork, metalwork design. Assuming all of this is handmade, and that probably would have taken a lot of time to learn how to make metalwork and do leatherwork and do sewing and stitching. And if anything, this is kind of a great example of where cosplay normally should be, and it shouldn't just all be lewd cosplay, because the lewd cosplay obviously is not what's going to go at a video game convention or be at a video game convention in most cases, and people aren't willing to actually walk around in that level of undress. Here's a rubber thing, raven, that may be handmade too. Something you see about the hair and the makeup here too is this seems it's still pretty makeup, but it seems a little bit toned down, more realistic for this character. Although in a lot of cases the characters being depicted are also ridiculous, so if this character Leanna, if this character is actually dressed completely different from this design, then that's going to feel a little weird. Although that's not 100% wrong if you say, hey, I kind of know how this character feels and would react, let's give her a different outfit. Although you generally never see somebody cosplaying a different outfit like the Red Nurse outfit we saw earlier, and that being embraced. Apparently, Antstream Arcade has become Xbox's first third-party cloud service. Xbox has spent months making cloud game deals, and now it's on the receiving end of one. So, beginning in July 21st, the Antstream Arcade service will be released on Xbox Series X and S and One. The service has been available on PC and Android devices. Coming to consoles opens up a reach to even more considering. This is a collection of retro games that I guess you're streaming them, and I guess they bought the rights to all of this to stream this. I don't know. 1,300 classic games. Although you run into this problem as far as retro games, is that they put these giant numbers, and of 1,300 classic games, there probably is about 30 you'd want to play. Even looking here, you're going to play Pac-Man maybe once, and I couldn't even tell you what this is from, or what this is from, or what this is from. Probably going to play Earth, Wind, Jim maybe once or twice. The King of Fighters series, I believe, is what this is from. You play that a couple times. And then, sure, I could see you going back and playing the original Mortal Kombat a couple times, but yeah. Most old games, not worth it. Apparently, Team Fortress 2 hits a new record at 254,000 concurrent players. Team Fortress 2 is still making just bags of money for Valve. Microsoft says that the Call of Duty's exclusivity experiment on PC was a resounding failure. They're referring to making Call of Duty exclusive to Battle.net from 2018 to 2022, which I kind of assume that is true. Although Microsoft would be willing to call the resounding failure, I'm sure Activision Blizzard would not use those terms. And this is almost certainly through more court filings. And so the lawyers are using language that perhaps the managers would not say. Genshin Impact voice actors allege they haven't been paid in months. The update to this story from GameDeveloper.com is that Genshin Impact's developer, Hoyoverse, has called on the English voice acting studio Formosa to pay its voice actors for their previous work. Which, yeah. Obviously, Hoyoverse and Genshin Impact wants no part of this bad press, even if they were possibly involved. I imagine it isn't super uncommon for voice actors to try to be underpaid or screwed over and not paid at all. And I imagine Chinese companies in general have a slightly higher percentage in which they'll try to pull tricks like that and not pay people. Or that Hoyoverse didn't pay the English voice acting people, and then the English voice acting people didn't, the English voice acting company didn't pay the employees. Yeah, we definitely have seen scenarios where a publisher is dragging their feet or not paying a developer, and then the developer is having to, whether they want to or not, drag their feet and not pay employees, which, yeah, that's definitely one of those the poop rolls downhill concepts. According to GameDeveloper.com, People Can Fly is opening a Montreal studio to expand its AAA production, which, yeah, Outriders developer, as I guess what you describe People Can Fly as. Maybe they are hitting a new era and actually think they can this time make AAA games that actually sell and stay in that area. But People Can Fly, I still very much remember from Bulletstorm and the disasters around Bulletstorm's development and writing, and then the re-release by Gearbox of Bulletstorm as Gearbox Publishing. And then People Can Fly just not really making much of anything successful in a rather long amount of time that they've existed. Game developer Video Games Chronicle has an article here that after 2.5 years, Cyberpunk 2077 Steam reviews are now very positive. CD Projekt thanks fans for acknowledging all the hard work the team has put in since release, which, I mean, I guess that's appropriate to thank it, but it is also probably appropriate at that point to apologize once again and just always be on bended knee and apologize for how terrible the game released. Now, the Steam rating systems to get to very positive means that they had to get past all the negative reviews one way or the other, and I doubt Steam let them say that review bombing was happening on Cyberpunk 2077 to nullivate some of the reviews. Is it worth it now, in my opinion, to play Cyberpunk 2077? No, still really isn't worth it. It's lost its point in which it could have had any important impact. And honestly, I would really just prefer them to reboot the Deus Ex series, which I think they own that, don't they? Yeah, I think they do. Just reboot the Deus Ex. No, they don't own Deus Ex, do they? Square Enix owns Deus Ex. Yep. So for Cyberpunk, they should give up on the Cyberpunk games, and CD Projekt Red should just reboot the Witcher series, which is exactly what they're doing. And we almost certainly should never see another game called Cyberpunk. If they want to make a sci-fi game that is similar to Witcher, it almost should be like a skin or DLC to whatever Witcher game is currently out, instead of trying to make something completely separate. But they probably should just stay away from Cyberpunk and sci-fi and go for something that maybe happens in modern time or has a more interesting narrative in a different way. Be very careful around sci-fi though. Maybe set something in space so it feels very different than Cyberpunk. Sony's accessibility PlayStation 5 controller will finally launch in December. They announced this like somewhere around January, it feels like. And yeah, I really do think they may have something here, although it's a very expensive controller too. And I don't think it's going to be a controller that too many people are really going to want to use, but compared to the Xbox One, I think they have a better design, just speaking design-wise. That being said, Microsoft has already gotten all the good press for announcing their accessibility controller and getting hype around it. I bet there's considerably less good press that Sony has gotten, and delaying the actual release has not helped them get more good press. And you look at a picture like this and it is somewhat confusing as just to how it would work and how it would set up. And for an accessibility controller, it should probably be very obvious how it's going to work and how it's going to set up. Here's an interesting story that caught my eye from Gametsu. Dungeon Travelers 2 and Dungeon Travelers 2-2 Steam release has been cancelled. Both titles are now available via Jourin, which I've never even heard of Jourin. I believe this was one of those games that when I saw it seemed somewhat weird that it would have been allowed on Steam in the first place, because Steam has been fairly strict, particularly about censoring games that have anime girls that look slightly younger because of the moe art style on their things, particularly if there's any lewd or adult content. And the comment here is, unfortunately, Steam guidelines makes it impossible to pass their review while maintaining the high quality standards we hold for these titles. We apologize to all players who are looking forward to the Steam versions. If anything, it seems to me like this was almost an intentional controversy. And in fairness, this is the kind of intentional controversies that need to happen to highlight that there is a level of hypocrisy and a level of censorship going on as far as Steam releases go. Let me just make sure everything here is YouTube family friendly. Not everything. Yep. So yeah, there are definitely some lewd things. I would say the characters I'm seeing aren't very much even in the moe side. They are more in the kawaii animation side, which makes them a little bit older, but there is a kind of young looking flat-chested girl in this screenshot in the bathing sequence. Although it seems like this whole thing is potentially censored. But yeah, there's been more censorship on Steam, um, or a continued level of censorship. That's kind of the problem with even when Steam announced that they got rid of a few of their of really bad games off of Steam storefront. It feels like there needs to be a separate archivist website where you could still go to something called archive.steam.com, and buy old games that they don't want on their storefront. Because there's this difference, and the analogy I was thinking is you probably do want a copy of Mein Kampf, Hitler's book, in it in most libraries for people to be able to read it. Even in like junior high school libraries and high school libraries, and maybe not elementary libraries because it's just not at that reading level. You want people to be able to read it, and not censor bad ideas just because they're bad ideas, or censor books because of who wrote them. But on the other hand, you don't want, ideally, Mein Kampf to be forced to be sold in every Walmart bookstore or every bookstore in the world, because not that many people would really buy it, and it's just a different thing. A bookstore is a place where you go to buy relevant and modern books to read. Libraries, particularly archivist libraries, should have every book, even if the books are garbage and nobody wants to read them in the first place. If I feel like Steam needs an archivist library equivalent, something called old.steam.com, that has a place where you can still buy, download, and install games, or even install games that were never even allowed on the Steam storefront in the first place. Why does Valve have to run that? The only reason they would run it is because they're the biggest people. But honestly, it probably should be a Library of Congress type website for video games, with the copyrights changing. But Valve certainly could help in part by having old games that they don't feel like they should be selling because they're just bad, or they're bad quality, or they don't sell that much. If they started to shift more games to something called old.steam without just delisting things completely, that'd be great. Although that still doesn't really fix this problem, which the problem with this certainly is this is an adult game where Valve has intentionally, in my opinion, misinterpreted the United States laws to disallow anime games with nudity in it. And there's a decent number of adult games that use anime as an art style. So there is a decent amount of censorship happening here. Notably, we haven't seen a lot of adult games come out this week in the first place. So there might very well be more censorship happening than even is getting talked about. At least the Japanese companies are indignant enough to say, hey, this is what's going on, and let the gamers know, whereas a lot of denials and censorship is happening behind closed doors, and the end user is not even aware of it. Which, at a certain level, it almost feels like if corporations are going to be allowed to censor things, they should be forced to file some kind of censorship form, or there should be a way to file freedom of information requests to Valve, and every month just get what games have you denied from being on your storefront and what are the reasons. And the way Valve is describing it, to say that their quality control is not good enough, and that the games are low quality just because they have an anime girl taking a bath in a public bathing, which in Japan, that's very common to have not anime girls, but real girls in public baths bathing together, and boys in a separate public bath bathing together of all ages. And public nudity in Japan is just very standard and not sexualized. Moving on, the judge denied the FTC injunction request. This has been updated, although I think we've been over this story a dozen times now, so let's move forward. They announced a Jurassic Park Classic Games collection for all consoles and PC, according to Komatsu. This includes Jurassic Park 2, The Chaos Continuum. Now, notably, though, that is not good games. That Jurassic Park for the NES, Game Boy, and Super NES. So potentially different versions of Jurassic Park 1 and Jurassic Park 2 on different versions. But not good games at all. I played Jurassic Park on the Super NES for maybe about an hour before I was nearly vomiting from motion sickness because of the just terrible 3D graphics here. This may be Jurassic Park 1. Yeah, I think I was playing that first one. You can see there's several different animation versions of the same thing. Don't think I played any of that. I probably didn't play Jurassic Park 2. If anything, this really just highlights, though, how terrible Steven Spielberg has been, as far, or maybe Universal Studios is to blame on that one, how terrible they've been as far as licensing a Jurassic Park game series, or trying it again, which now would definitely be the time to say, hey, well, even a few years ago, it would have been the time to say, hey, let's make a new game based around Jurassic Park. Telltale, maybe 10-15 years ago, made a Jurassic Park game that's not being included in this. It was one of Telltale's early, before the Walking Dead games. I think it was right before the Walking Dead on Telltale. But yeah, nowadays you could very easily make something not too different from like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where you would be chased by very nicely ray traced dinosaurs, T-Rexes, as you're trying to escape in a survival adventure game. Now that the graphics are way better, and with Dial of Destiny being released, it would make sense to release a new Indiana Jones game, or re-release old Indiana Jones games remastered in some way. But Steven Spielberg, even though he was involved with Bloombox, has kind of done a bad job with video games. If he has any influence on whether video games are made or not, he may very well not have any influence, and it may just be Universal Studios or whoever owns the rights to his movies. Yeah, it is crazy though that there aren't more Jurassic Park games that are better. It's kind of crazy that there aren't dinosaur games in general, like a Turok game. The best Jurassic Park games would be the Lego games, I guess, and they're not particularly good either. At the very least, you could have mobile games around Jurassic Park. This was a surprise, I think, to all. A Clock Tower, quote, Port Plus has been announced for all consoles and PC. It's coming out in 2024. What does a Port Plus mean? Well, Way Forward and Limited Run Games are going to basically remake the game and reanimate it. So this is possibly a screenshot of what Clock Tower looked like originally. Very pixely. You were being chased by the Scissor Man. And what Way Forward, I think, is going to try and do is, and you're just in this spooky clock tower / house. I think what they're going to try and do is have an animator, like they did in River City Girls, revitalize the game series and reboot it with a newer, still flat 2D animation style, but much more reasonable. Clock Tower, I believe, never came to the West. So here's a newer animation style, and you can see it's much smoother, much more for a widescreen 16:9 ratio. I thought there was a little bit of a video here too, as far as the announcement trailer. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure Clock Tower ever actually made it to the West. I think maybe its sequel did. And it is interesting that Way Forward is now doubling down on the idea of let's take some niche Japanese game and let's give it some new animation and bring it to a new audience and revitalize it. Of course, Clock Tower is kind of this horror adventure game, and they're not going super crazy with this. If this was a AAA developer, I believe this is the new animator that's talking. If this was a AAA developer of games, they would almost certainly try to make Clock Tower a 3D experience in which you're just being constantly chased by like an asset flip scissor man. And it really wouldn't work at that point. You would lose the charm of it. The scissor man chasing her this is very much a 1960s, 70s, 80s Japanese horror movie feel to it, that you're just going to have this guy with a giant ridiculous pair of scissors chasing you, and you're going to constantly avoid being killed by them. Yeah, I feel like there was a sequel on a boat that happened, or a spiritual sequel. And at a certain level, there's only so much you can do with this. So I think they're very right to potentially remaster it into the. Let's see, are we going to actually get any depiction of the art? Just the cover art. Alright, yeah. You can see they're going for a River City Girls type style of animation. Seems like maybe 4 or 5 people are being interviewed around this, so I would suspect maybe only 4 or 5 people are actually going to make this. What would be interesting is if this was one of those games where you can hit the back button at any point and see the original graphics. They are also promoting this Carbon engine, which that may be new, as far as where we've created a new engine to potentially port a few games. There's Capcom, Sunsoft, a lot of people who potentially have some ownership to Clock Tower too, so that might be a somewhat complicated thing. This is one of those games that is historically relevant if people know about it, much more than if you were just to bring back Gex, because fewer people, I think, know about Clock Tower, so it's beneficial to educate a new generation about games, or even the old generation about games they've missed, than it is just to re-release Gex, which most people do know about. Then what was I clicking on? Speaking of some other craziness, though, Way Forward again, and I think a lot of this is at the 8-Bit Summit event that has started, I think, earlier today or yesterday. So 8-Bit Summit, or Bit Summit, whatever it's called, in Japan seems to be bigger than Tokyo Game Show as far as new announcements. But Way Forward, not really a Japanese company, has announced Shantae Advanced Risky Revolution for the Game Boy Advanced, trying, I think, intentionally to be the last game ever made for the Game Boy Advance. That being said, it kind of does make some sense, because This was originally a Game Boy game, I think. Anyways, this was a Lost Shantae series. Although it's just ridiculous to release it on the Game Boy Advance, because that basically means people with emulators are the only people that are going to be able to really play this. And even at that, I guess you're going to have to rip the ROM from the Game Boy Advance cartridge, or find, like, how many people could even find a working Game Boy Advance these days? Apparently this was a once cancelled sequel, so don't expect too much from it. These will be the graphics of the game. Maybe they will eventually try and port it to PC in some kind of emulator. That would make a lot more sense. Meanwhile, what would be considered the canonical sequels to Shantae have gone in a very different direction and look much more modern. And this Risky Revolution canceled sequel is going to just be an oddity side note. Let's see, I'm still on the new news here. I haven't even gotten to just looking at the regular news. We're going to have to burn through the regular news, or this is going to be a 4-hour stream. Xbox has announced that they are going to add a functionality where if you want to report somebody, you can grab the audio clips, and I would have to assume that it is just rolling audio and it is always recording, as far as people talking to you in chat and video clips, which originally these were features that would have been developed to share video clips and audio clips on social media and make like YouTube short type things or Instagram shorts. But now it's being used against content creators, not content creators, but people in general who may say something nasty. So this is probably something that's going to be better for everybody to know. You could at any point be recorded, although in reality you could have always been recorded. Somebody could have had a microphone up to a speaker at any point and recorded you, but Microsoft is willing to let people make recordings in the Xbox ecosystem and send them as reports. The audio recordings you make will automatically be deleted after 24 hours. If you don't send a report, they probably will be automatically deleted after they're sent as a report after 24 hours too. I don't think there's going to be a way to keep those audio voice clips or video clips for a while. What you would like to see potentially is that a lot of people report things, and Microsoft eventually develops somewhat of a thick skin and says, actually, we don't consider that bad, and you will get reports back. Clip can be accessed for 24 hours period, during which it can only be used to submit in a player's report. Once the period ends, it's automatically deleted. I have to wonder, though, if the audio and video clips aren't immediately then being processed into some kind of text-to-speech adapter or artificial intelligence scanner program, and it takes a while for any of it to actually be heard by an actual human being. You also run into the problem where people moderating Xbox very possibly are just underpaid Indian workers who barely understand the English and are just going to click accept, reject willy-nilly to get their work done as fast as possible. And here was that Freddy Krueger cosplay. We don't need to talk about that again. This cosplayer in particular has a different cosplay for every letter of the alphabet, and they're doing ABCs of cosplay. Which, yeah, that's what she wants to do, I guess. Keeps the attention. So finally we get to this. The Steam Summer Sale is over. So now it would just be weekend sales. It looks like a bunch of Lego games are on sale. The Steam Deck is back to regular price. You're not getting things for going through your discovery queue. You're not getting trading cards for going through your discovery queue. Everything is back to normal, and the background seems to still be this light blue, potentially getting darker and darker by one shade. At the rate that the background is getting darker, though, it probably would be 10 years before it's just full black background. They may not have actually wanted to make the background full black. They may just want it to be this dark blue compared to these light blue and gray. Alright, moving on. Didn't mean to click on that. Video Games News Chronicles. Video Games Chronicles. A lot of this news I think we already talked about, so we'll go through this very quickly. Microsoft disappointed about them appealing the voice feature. Just telling kids that this is a thing will probably improve behavior a little bit. Inherently, it has been shown that if you just put a cardboard cutout of somebody with eyes looking at a person, it will statistically increase the behavior, improve the behavior of people around. Just people thinking that they're not being watched leads to them doing worse things. That's why they have mirrors on the back bar of bars. When you see yourself and when you know other people can see you in the reflection, you tend to behave better. Not that I'm making the argument that there's more than average misbehavior amongst gamers at all. I think it's pretty much the same. The only difference is people can communicate better. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown gets a fresh delay. Switch version is being possibly cancelled, according to Video Games Chronicle. Again, just going to try and pour through all this news very quickly. The Last of Us has received 24 Emmy nominations. Only the final season of Succession is up for more awards at this year's ceremony, although I think to be up for an award, you probably just have to submit a form. So HBO paying to have them be nominated in 24 different categories doesn't really mean that much. It'll be much more impactful to see how many Emmys they really win, and I would suspect that you're probably talking 3 or 4. Seems like Succession, which was up for 27 awards for its 4th and final season, has previously won 13 Emmys. So if they can beat 13 Emmys, somewhere between 3 or 4 is my guess, and 13 would be the competitor of Succession, I guess that'd be a big success. Even if they got 6 or 7, I would think that's a big success. I'd have to know the exact categories. I could see Outstanding Drama Series, maybe Outstanding Lead Actor. I don't know if Lead Actress, as Ellie, deserves an Emmy. It doesn't matter, she won't get it. She's too young. Emmys are snobs. They won't give Lead Actress awards to a young person who doesn't really have a career around it. A lot of times you get awards for your entire career, and that may even hurt Pedro Pascal, is that he may not have enough of a career to deserve an Emmy in the Emmys' minds. If this was best breakout actress in a lead, she probably would get it as a nomination. Outstanding guest actor, maybe. There. I bet they don't get any writing awards, or maybe they would get writing awards. But I could see Emmys saying, no, we're not giving any writing awards because it was already written by Naughty Dog and video games. And Neil Druckmann getting an Emmy is probably distasteful in the Emmy Awards Committee's mind. And honestly, giving any awards to a video game based thing is something I think they're going to be very snobbish about. Unless the Emmys want to send a message that all of the striking actors now who are also striking with the writers, unless the Emmys is trying to send a message saying you can be replaced with video game writers and you're only a step away from being replaced with AI video game characters as far as the actors are concerned. But no, I think Emmys are snobs for the most part, and they'll try to give very few awards, maybe a handful, 5, 6, but I bet they are far short from 13. Final Fantasy 16 DLC options are being explored according to the producer, says Video Games Chronicles. Final Fantasy 16, I guess, sold well enough, but it is kind of way late to the party to think about doing DLC. Although I wouldn't be surprised if Square Enix does release some kind of Final Fantasy 16 DLC like a year after Final Fantasy 17 is released. I mean, anything is on the table when it comes to Final Fantasy, in my opinion. If we're getting like remakes that tell different stories of Final Fantasy 7 decades later. July's PlayStation Plus game catalog and classic titles have been announced. List here on Video Games Chronicles if you want to check that out. A Need for Speed Most Wanted remake is coming next year, claims a voice actor. So twice now we have voice actors breaking things, breaking news, or claiming to break news. We've been over this ad nauseum as far as the CMA making a new investigation. Activision Blizzard is going to be removed from the NASDAQ 100 ahead of the planned Microsoft merger. The companies hope to close the deal before their current agreement expires next week. It is next week. So, yeah. The 18th of July was the cutoff day. Well, interesting how they put this. They say a temporary restraining order preventing the door from being completed would expire at 11:59 p.m. today. So tomorrow, basically, at 12 o'clock at midnight tomorrow, they're gonna sign those papers, and the FTC wasn't able to secure an extension. And it was July 18th, so 4 days from now, if the merger doesn't go through, that $3 billion termination fee would go to Activision Blizzard, unless Activision Blizzard agreed to an extension, which I don't know if Activision Blizzard would agree to an extension, but they probably would, because if they don't agree to an extension, I don't know if Microsoft is going to continue with the merger, and the merger is worth way more than $3 billion. The question here, unfortunately, is as far as stock markets, it's too late to do anything around Activision Blizzard. If you had bought Activision Blizzard stock at a low after the merger was originally announced, then you could potentially get it converted into Microsoft stock or just get paid out in cash. I'm not sure which way it has to go, if it has to go either way, when Activision Blizzard gets merged with Microsoft. But the valuation of that stock is already preset at, I think, somewhere around $69 a share. Maybe I'm picking that number out of the air, but let's just say it was $69 a share. And people already knew that that was the set price when the merger was announced. So you would have had to have bought stock below that announced price when it was low. And now it's way too late to do any of that. You could potentially try and buy Microsoft shares and stocks and see if it goes up higher, which you could always have done that, and there's a decent chance there. If you were crazy and wanted to short Microsoft stock, you could probably do that too. But as Activision Blizzard stock is being delisted from the NASDAQ, you can't do anything with that at that point. We're not going to talk about their podcast. The Witcher Season 3 Volume 2's official trailer has been released if you want to check that out on Video Games Chronicles. We talked about the actor claiming he's the main character in Call of Duty 2024. The next free Epic Games Store titles have been announced. Elder Scrolls Online and Murder by Numbers will replace Train Value and Witch. Train Value 2, which is now free, not a game called Witch. I need to make sure I grab that while I can. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart won't require an SSD on PC. The game will run at 720p, 30 frames per second without an SSD. I assume it could do better with an SSD. There were some decent SSDs during the Prime Day sales if you absolutely needed one, but there's also a chance that we'll get a better second generation of PCI Express 4.0 SSDs in the next year or two. So if you can hold off, now would be a decent time to hold off. Although maybe your motherboard wouldn't support a second generation of PCI Express 4.0. I think it's 4x4.0 and not 4x4. I think it's 4.0. I assume Ratchet & Clank on the PlayStation didn't require an SSD. But then, come to think of it, there isn't a PlayStation 5 that doesn't have an SSD built into it. Yeah, none of them have hard drives in them built in anymore, do they? We already talked about the Access controller launching in December for $90. EA Sports Football Club 24 has a full reveal with release date, crossplay, ultimate team, and more if you want to check that out at Video Games Chronicles. Let's see. This was FTC story still. Microsoft is reportedly considering selling some of its UK cloud gaming rights. The company believes the move could help it seal the regulatory approval for Activision merger. I assume Microsoft is willing to make some concessions to just get the merger gone through. But we would... I imagine they wouldn't want to sell too much. And I don't know what UK cloud gaming rights. I guess they might just be straight up saying we would sell in part or in whole what is Xbox Game Pass to another company in the UK. And some other company would run Xbox Game Pass in the UK. Which we definitely have seen some business arrangements like that in the past, and it's always confusing as to why that exists. Why there might be a BBC that is run by one company in the UK and a BBC America run by, I think, a different company. Or why BBC and BBC America are such different channels when they really should just be the same content in general. But yeah, we shall see. It's really just speculation at this point. At least this is Microsoft saying, hey, we would stay in the UK, whereas the bigger threat was that they would just pull completely out of the UK and then you couldn't buy Xbox anything in the UK at all. That was their biggest threat they could make. UK regulator has extended the Activision merger decision by 6 weeks, but I think the FTC's injunction is really the only thing that's going to stop the merger from happening in the United States, since they're both United States companies. I don't think the UK has the same delaying tactics that the FTC does. I don't think they can possibly post-merger make some rulings and laws, but I don't think they can actually stop it. Well, they can stop its effects maybe in the UK, but not in the United States or the rest of the world. We talked about People Can Fly opening a Montreal studio to work on Just Cause 3's director's original game, which we don't know what that original game is. Assume this is Outriders and this is Bulletstorm, and when you have a studio that has literally only 2 games you can even mention, it's probably not successful enough to be moving into AAA. If anything, I think they need to probably fully admit that they are a triple B game studio, not a AAA game studio, or a AA game studio is I guess what you really would call that. Yeah, they don't need to go that ambitious. I think that's part of the problem even of Bulletstorm, is it's very ambitious for its engine and technology, and just didn't get the story well or get enough people playing it in the first place. We talked about the enhanced version of Last of Us 2. We talked about Cyberpunk's Steam reviews being very positive. That brings us to Kimetsu articles. An interactive animated adventure called Azaretti, the Jewel of Faramore, has been announced for PS4 and 5, Switch, and Xbox Series and PC. Which just looks somewhat interesting. Let's see if we can skip around here. Platforming. I definitely don't like that animation. Yeah, if anything, this seems like this is parodying the Zelda CDI games. I don't know if I'm really willing to go along with that parody as far as the visuals. This clearly is a parody of the Zelda CDI games. But it is coming from Limited Run Games, so it might be something to keep an eye out. We don't have a link to Steam yet. A game called This Way Lies Madness is coming to the Switch on July 25th and the PS5 later. This is a different interface for an RPG game, and I like the idea of experimenting on just how turn-based RPG games may look and play. I feel like this, for a 16:9 ratio, makes a lot more sense compared to more traditional art styles. Now, weirdly, this is another character that looks dangerously close to a Zelda clone from Limited Run Games, although it does kind of have a Sailor Moon feel to it also. For the most part, though, you still have that top-down RPG element. Really isn't a lot here that looks amazing. But I guess I have hit a point now where if something gets a press release, it should get a follow, or at least a YouTube short. Let's see. A Super Mario RPG inspired Another Crusade has been announced for all consoles and PC throughout this fall. And what's interesting about that idea, certainly, is while I would have liked to play the Super Mario RPG remake, I would have just been able to play it on my Switch and then talk about it on my channel without showing any footage, which is not very interesting. I would just talk about it during a live stream. Whereas, in contrast, I could play this game from beginning to end and stream it, or not stream it, but make footage around it and criticize it. I could potentially even do both, though. Wait till this game is maybe a little bit cheaper. I don't even know what it's going to sell at. But get it after the initial launch window, play Super Mario RPG on the Switch, then play this game to contrast that. Although that would be a lot of RPG gameplay back to back. A 2D, 2.5D platformer called Double Shake has been announced for PS4 and 5 and Switch and PC. Is this another limited run games announcement? It is, but limited run games apparently not the publisher according to the Steam version. A lot of these games feel like they are parroting fairly old games, and they don't seem amazingly don't seem really amazingly well visually polished, so they may not really stand up to the test of time. Clock Tower port we talked about. Jurassic Park we talked about. A game called Tomba! Is coming to the PS4 and 5 and the Switch and PC. Do we have a Steam link on this? This again, I think, might be a new take on an old game or a parody of an old game. This is very 3D animated, trying to look 2D, but I heavily suspect this is just the intro cutscene they're showing here. This too is being announced for the Carbon engine, so there's a big push here for this Carbon engine, and I guess limited run games trying to push people to use the Carbon engine. I wouldn't, if other companies other than limited run games start to release games on the Carbon engine, we may see a new competitor to something like the Unity engine. Probably not much competition to the Unreal Engine though. But also, of the game's visuals and styles we've seen, it's pretty obvious games that can play that the Carbon engine can emulate / run are not AAA, very visual games. They are old looking games. Gex Trilogy for the PS4, Xbox, PS5, Switch, and PC. No Steam link yet. Limited Run Games announced over 20 new physical releases at the Limited Runs Games, or LRG3. I guess that's supposed to be E3 comparison. And if anything, I guess that does highlight that they made a smart move by separating out their announcements compared to all the other people who made announcements during the Summer Games Fest, because now I am talking about these games that I otherwise would have completely overlooked. A lot of games here. Colossal Cave apparently getting a re-release again, maybe a physical edition. El Shaddai, Gargoyles remastered, a different Jurassic Park from the Jurassic Park Classic Games collection. Maybe this is, they're selling Jurassic Park, the collection of Jurassic Park, and the chaos continues. Karateka. Yeah, this is quite the list. A soundtrack collection for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I don't think most of these games, though, are being first announced here, more than they're just being re-announced. Hatsune Miku, the Planet of Wonder and Fragments of Wishes is coming to PC, which I guess Hatsune Miku is still probably popular enough to justify that. Although weirdly, this does seem like this is a collection of mini games. I'm going to put this on the fall list just because I want to see what other people rated at. We already talked about Dungeon Travelers 2 and 2-1, or 2-2. I think Dungeon Travelers 1, however, is weirdly on Steam, which that confuses the issue even more. Or maybe it was a case even that Dungeon Travelers 1 wasn't on Steam, and then they announced Dungeon Travelers 2 on Steam, and then now they've unannounced it on Steam. Who's this developer and who's this publisher? Aquaplus is a name I've heard of. Exanoa and Shiravune are not companies I recognize. We really don't have time to click on them and see what else they've released, if anything. A game called Aquarium for PC launches October 26th in Japan. PC version includes an additional story. Here you have an anime girl in summer wear. It is summertime right now in Japan, so in Asia. It's pretty much summertime for everybody in the northern hemisphere or near the equator, so it's not surprising you're getting more summer screenshots. Does this have a link to show what PC storefront is going to be on? No, but Aquarium first launched on the PS4 and Switch in 2022 in Japan. No indication that it's coming to the West, though. A Rear Sakai opening movie and 15-second commercial is available. Rear Sakai looks like a mobile phone game. Really? Nice art on the thumbnail, but uninteresting art in the actual screenshots. Ys 10 Nordics details several characters and features if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. We definitely are going more in a Nordic visual style, which seems odd compared to the rest of the Ys series. I've yet to figure out if the Ys series is worth playing. Yggdrasil Union Will Never Fight Alone for the Switch is coming to the West on July 27th alongside a full PC listing. This is rated very positively, but doesn't really look like it's my style of game. Does look like it's going to come out of early access though. Let's see. Banisher's Ghost of New Eden launches November 7th. And let's see what that looks like. Well, I think I've had to do with Firefox because the tabs kept crashing. Is disable the hardware acceleration on Firefox, but not disable the performance improvement checkbox because that slows things down too much. You definitely notice that when you're loading in a picture, if you don't have hardware acceleration in, that it is taking a lot longer for a photo to load in. So you kind of do want that video card hardware acceleration. The fact that it's having any trouble though is unacceptable. It should just work, and I shouldn't have to mess with things. Maybe it has something to do with my OBS or some extension plugged in, but none of it really should be affecting things like that. Moving on, Trinity S launches October 20th. It's currently on PC in early access. Yep. When it's black like that, that's not a problem, I think, really, of hardware acceleration. Though, if it's just a solid black image, it's not loading, I think that has more to do with memory management on Firefox's part. Hardware acceleration, you would see a few lines of the picture slowly loading in. Famitsu sales from the 3rd to the 9th have been updated. Let's just skim this fairly quickly. The newest thing is in 21st position, Pretty Princess Magical Garden Island, and then F123 is in 27th position, and nothing else is new. So a slow week, to say the least. And decent numbers for the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, continuing to do decent numbers too. It would take a long time though for the PlayStation 5 to catch up, and inherently, even if the PlayStation 5 could catch up in the number of sales to the OLED model. They're not going to catch up to the sales of the original Switch, and Nintendo is probably a year or two away from announcing a new console, which would then probably blow out the PlayStation 5 sales numbers also. Let's see, a game called Symphony is coming to the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series and Switch on July 21st. It's currently already available for PC. See, when the images just pop in, that's video acceleration. See, this was a new tab. Not sure I 100% think this is a game worth playing, but weirdly it's already on my wish list. So I guess I did qualify it enough. It is rated very positively. It does have over 30 reviews. If I raised my standards and said you needed over 100 reviews, which would be tripling the requirements, then it still would qualify. Now noticeably, its all-time peak has had only 36 people playing it, but that's where an all-time peak can really confuse you, particularly when it's not a multiplayer game. It really doesn't matter if there aren't that many people at the same time playing a game if people are just playing it at different times. Harvest Moon: The Winds of Anthos has a debut trailer if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Lunar Lander Beyond has been announced for all consoles and PC. It's a title based on the 1979 Atari Arcade Classic. Let's see, do we have a Steam link? Not yet. So Lunar Lander would have been a very old game. So the question is, what is a remake or remaster of that idea going to be? Weirdly, we're getting a lot of animation here for what I don't think you really need to see. I want to see gameplay into that. And they've got no gameplay to show. Seems like game developers intentionally hold back gameplay footage, probably because it would look awful, and prefer you to see teaser trailers, which ideally, if we had tighter false advertising laws, we wouldn't have teaser trailer as a concept, and they would only announce games when they actually had a vertical slice of gameplay footage. A game called Irem Collection Volume 2 has been announced for the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series and Switch. I'm not sure what kind of game it is. It looks like it's a old shooter, 8-directional shooter type game. Tank driving game. A Stronghold Definitive Edition has been announced for PC. It's a real-time strategy game due out November 7th. Did I click on that? Apparently I didn't. This is probably not the kind of game I would play, but I'm going to be generous and put it on the fall list. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot DLC, the 23rd World Tournament Ground Battle trailer is available, which I think this is probably further back in the story than the latest World Tournament in Dragon Ball Z, although Dragon Ball Z is over, so yep. I'm not familiar enough with the story to be able to tell you if the 23rd World Tournament is the one that ends with like Cell and Boo attacking, or if it's a different one. We talked about the access controller for the PS5 launching December 6th. A game called Zombie Soup launches on August 10th for the PS4 and 5 and Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. It's currently available in early access on Steam. This is one of those games that I must have made a YouTube short around, despite the name. Actually, these screenshots sell me a lot more on Zombie Soup than what I thought it was going to be. This screenshot actually does a disservice. It makes it look like it's a asset flip, low polygon game when I don't think it's really is that. I think it's more of a top-down twin stick shooter game. But since it already is on the follow list, I'm going to assume I already made a short around it. A game called Nightmare Escape launches July 20th. It's a narrative-driven horror adventure game. Let's see if that has a follow. Yep. Games that just add a release date aren't going to get another YouTube short at that point. Oh, yeah, and somebody on my YouTube channel is about to get blocked as soon as I figure out how to do it, because they put a comment that says, I'm going to delete this comment in 3 hours, so you only have that much time to read it, or something along that lines. Which, yeah, I'm not willing to let people dictate my schedule to me, particularly people that aren't paying me a lot. I suffer from insomnia. If you want to hear an excuse as to why I might be asleep for 3 hours, or I might just be a normal human being who sometimes sleeps for 8 to 12 hours a day. And I, in general, am not going to abide people putting nonsense comments on my channel in the first place. And I'm not going to abide people deleting comments and changing the history. Ideally, I want people, if they're going to put a comment, to leave that comment up there forever. I can excuse a lot of reasons why you might delete a comment, but just trying to get a notification sent to me so that I respond on your time is not an acceptable reason to delete a comment or post a comment in the first place. The initial posting of that comment is offensive, let alone the idea of deleting it after the fact. And yeah, that's really not to probably blame anybody who's real. There's just a lot of fake accounts that follow and comment on YouTube, and I assume that is some troll or fake account. But yeah, don't do that if you are a real person. That's rude, to say the least. Moving on, Astrolabe Games is going to publish a 2D Metroidvania game called Anatine for consoles and PC, which has a Steam link. Let's see. Not anything super impressive here, but I'll give it a chance. It does seem like that is the narrative today, as we've got a lot of announcements today, but not anything majorly impressive. Evo Tinction has a Bit Summit Let's Go trailer. I guess that's it. It's called Bit Summit Let's Go, not 8-Bit Summit. Feels like there was something called 8-Bit Summit at some point, but they probably changed the name because the games aren't all 8-bit games, obviously, or even 16-bit games. Astrolab Games is going to publish a Metroidvania game called Sophie Starlight Whispers for consoles and PC. It's kind of interesting to have two Metroidvania games from, I think, the same publisher. Although visually this one looks a lot more interesting. Perhaps the camera's a little too zoomed out. And there is something about this character I think that potentially is fairly interesting as a different type of character design. Astrolabe Games is going to publish a multiplayer dating simulation game called Doomsday Paradise for PC in Asia, seemingly exclusively in Asia. Seems like there's multiple monsters. If anything, I think there is a case here where too many of these dating games run into these gimmicks. And a little bit of a gimmick makes sense, but At a certain point, it does just kind of feel like they are just being ridiculous with Giant Crab Man dating game. And if anything, it seems like when you have a dating game like this that has gimmicks, then what you're really doing is you're just avoiding having fetishes or tropes. Whereas a real dating game would just have the blonde, the brunette, the redhead, the big boobs, the small boobs. Maybe the transgendered character would be thrown in there. Maybe you'd go silly with one character and have like an unlockable cat girl. Like in Honey Pop, I think they had an unlockable cat girl after you dated the main characters. But once you start with the original gimmick, you're just not going there. It also seems like this may be a bisexual type dating games in which you're dating both guys and girls and aren't potentially given a choice, or at least male presenting characters and female presenting characters. This game isn't in the adult section. Let's see what the content review. Like, there's no mature content warning in the description either. So I assume it's going to be fairly toned down. Astrolab Games is also going to publish Chanbara Films inspired action game called Gure for consoles and PC. Chanbara. I don't know what Chanbara means. Samurai style films, maybe? I know the game Oni Chanbara, and I know Oni in that sense is older sister or little sister. I think older sister. So older sister samurai would make sense. Guess what I should do? Yeah, see if I can I define something, or do I just need to search? Okay. Chanbara, also spelled Chambara, meaning sword fighting films, denotes a Japanese film genre called samurai cinema in English and is roughly equivalent to Western and swashbuckler films. Chanbara is a subcategory of Jida Igeki, which equates to period drama. Jida Igeki may refer to a story set in a historical period, though not necessarily dealing with a samurai character or depicting swordplay. Okay, so now I know what Chambara means. I've never heard that phrase before, or if I have, I've paid no attention to it. Astrolabe Games is also going to publish a roguelike action game called Metavoidal for consoles and PC. So clearly, a lot of announcements here. This is going to create a weird situation where we're going to have a lot of shorts just from Astrolabe Games. Now, you really don't have a way of making shorts to kind of spread that out. Astrolabe Games is also going to publish a deck builder called Zero Division for consoles and PC. If anything, this is like a breakout success for Astrolabe Games, and that I don't even know if I knew their name yesterday, and today they all of a sudden are this huge Japanese game publisher. Let's see, Maquette for Xbox One and Xbox Series launches July 19th. It came out on Steam a while ago. That being said, you can see it's not particularly well received, and I must have just made an exception and put it on the wish list. And there's no update or polish on this to change your opinion from that mixed reviews. Annapurna Interactive putting it out. If anything, Maquette may just be a tech demo more than a game. It may be more interesting as a tech demo than a game. Let's see. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge DLC Dimension Shell Shock Survivor Mode trailer and gameplay is available if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. The Tencent subsidiary Lightspeed Studios has acquired Lucid Games, so effectively Tencent has acquired Lucid Games. The studio will continue to operate independently. Lucid Games is behind Destruction All Stars and Switchblade, which notice how their automatic link maker software took the word Switch in Switchblade and put a link under it to go to the Nintendo Switch. And nobody caught that. Although in all fairness, I think only one person runs Gematsu. Anyways, and I'm surprised he accomplishes as much as he does. I think he's the only one even working on it, although maybe not. EA Sports Football Club 24 launches September 29th. This Sal Romano. Yeah, we'll keep an eye out and see if any other articles here are from any other person. Stray Gods, the role-playing musical, has been delayed to August 10th with a one-week delay. And that's Sal Romano. 2. Suheisha Games and Magnus Games Studio announced a survival crafting RPG called Project Survival for PC and more. Again from Sal. Let's see. I guess there is a danger, certainly, if we're going to let anybody who has a press release get a YouTube short, that we will end up with a lot of survival games that I personally would have just dismissed and curated away. But you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be curating things away. Aniplex and Acquire are seemingly teasing a joint project at Bit Summit's Let's Go. A character named Amu. This is Cell also. Here you can see there's a lot of cleavage, but also kind of a low resolution character. Full name Amu Usagi. Usagi being the Japanese word for bunny. That's the bunny ears. And they seem to really just be teasing that character, and that's it. So that's little news and very not very actionable news, certainly. Oink Games has announced an RPG called Seifo and the Moon Warriors for Switch and PC. A Kickstarter campaign is going to launch later this week. That is Sal also. Eventually it will be released on Steam. The art style looks a little different. I don't know if I really love it. I kind of like this character design, though. It almost has like a children's picture book animation style to it, which is one of the many animation styles that have just never been tried or worked on video games. I have a ton of shorts today already, and I guess that makes up for the rest of this week where it's been fairly slow. A game called Umbra Claw is adding a Switch version and has gameplay reveal, trailer details, and screenshots. I assume this is some kind of platformer where you play as a cat, which isn't the worst idea because cats are notoriously known for being good at platforming in the real world. The Ecliglia Effect 2 for the PS5 launches October 17th in North America and October 20th in Europe. High five animation here going. Dragon Quest Treasures is now available for PC, which I'm not really sure that this is a game that is worth playing on PC, and it almost certainly is just a mobile phone game that's being ported to PC. And that brings us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, which, yeah. It's been a long stream. I guess a lot to talk about, or maybe I was just ranting and distracted a little bit too much today. I don't feel like I got into too many rants today. GameDeveloper.com articles, though. Let's see. We already talked about Lucid Games being acquired. We already talked about blockchain support. We already talked about Microsoft saying Call of Duty PC exclusivity was a resounding failure. There was this story where TinyBuild, it was reported that TinyBuild is using artificial intelligence tools, aka ChatGPT, to monitor staff and identify problematic quote-unquote workers. This has been since updated, saying the CEO says that the recent talk that indicated the publisher uses AI to monitor staff was, quote, hypothetical, end quote, which, I mean, either you trust the CEO or he's straight up just lying here and covering his butt. And problematic workers, I think he was more implying that he was sending internal emails to ChatGPT to identify burnout, which theoretically, trying to identify burnout through communications isn't a terrible idea. But you could very easily flip the script and identify people who are looking for other jobs or are unhappy with their current job, or people who are just causing conflict in general, to find problematic workers. Although it really is the work from home argument all over the place, is that if a manager can't identify a worker who is burnt out or who is problematic, then the manager, the middle manager in that case, almost certainly should be fired, and you should have a better middle manager. Or if management in general just can't identify a problem, then is there really a problem in the first place? Problems often only exist when somebody identifies it or determines it is a problem. And it is very feasible that some game developer may just have a negative attitude always, but they may be a great worker and they may do great work, and that may just be them. They may just be a Debbie Downer. And they may enjoy being in a state that other people would define as burnout. I think a lot of people intentionally seek that out, particularly in the game programming development industry. But yeah, a lot of hay being made and a lot of updates being made here. But yeah, it certainly is coming. Like, unless there's some protections and laws and just limitations on AI, we are going to see some kind of automated system. Probably doesn't need to be AI. AI is probably a dumb way to even do that. But I could see there being a list of hostile words or burnout words that give some kind of percentage score to messages. And when a message is written somewhat hostilely, it might be looked at by somebody at HR. HR is constantly trying to justify their existence and would do that kind of insane things. Even Gmail itself now has tone policing features where it might warn you if you're writing a response that your tone might be more aggressive than you really want it to be. And certainly it doesn't really improve society if everybody does become monotone because they've been tone policed to an extreme level. And what's really in the hearts of workers as far as being hostility or burnout is still going to be there. In fact, you're just increasing the hostility if people know they're being monitored and they have to only say happy-go-lucky things. We already talked about Team Fortress 2 hitting a new record. We already talked about Ant Street Arcade. We already talked about the CMA. And we already talked about Major Nelson. So then the fall list cleanup didn't run correctly. So we're skipping the fall list cleanup today. I can't middle click to close this tab because it's a Firefox tab, and plugins don't work on Firefox tabs. So then that's going to bring us to just going through all the games on Steam. We have Jagged Alliance 3 coming out. Should I make a YouTube short on something that already is on the follow list though? Well, I guess that's the thing though, is that if I make a YouTube short when a game is first announced, and I don't make a YouTube short when a date is announced, then it comes out on that date. Should I make another YouTube short on it? I guess I'll say yes, just because that kind of makes some sense. What We Do in the Shadows is on Hulu, which I wasn't really expecting that series to come back as far as a TV show, as I'm still trying to struggle through Futurama's latest seasons. Late season 9, I think, is where I am. They did a weird thing, certainly, where they went from making 4-episode long mini movies and telling a much better story to just going back to 22-minute comedy single episode stories that always feel like they just kind of abruptly end and don't have much of a resolution to their build-up, or don't have enough build-up in the first place. So it's fairly off-putting. I think we'll say no to Mall Mushroom here. Catch and Cook Fishing Adventures we'll give a chance to. Leafy Trails, guess we'll give a chance to it, even though I've seen several games like that turn out to just be asset flip games. Emergency Crew looks good enough for a short. False Front, interesting title, perhaps a bad title though, and overall I think it is just an asset flip first person shooter, so I'm gonna say no to it. Necrotic Haze. Screenshots just show a bunch of environments and a little too dark screenshot syndrome, so I'm gonna say no to it. Throwback. Looks like it's a VR game, which might have some chance to be good. Enchantment Secret Hideaway. Looks like a hidden object game. I'll make a short around that. Abandonware, the horror collection. Yeah, the Bleach, latest new season of Bleach is also on Hulu, but I wouldn't really recommend watching it until you have several episodes you can watch in a row, because just like the rest of the Bleach series, it's really one long series over the course of decades that you'd want to watch. And particularly this newest season is really trying to fix some of the problems of the previous animated Bleach seasons. I think we'll say no to Finesse. Call Heating. Yeah, I don't think there's a way you can make the idea of call waiting fun. And visually this isn't polished enough. So our first adult game here is Mom Got Stuck in the Washing Machine, which is kind of oddly merging the fetish trope of lady gets stuck in a washing machine, which there's basically no way you would get stuck in a washing machine in the way that they are stuck, with both their legs and their hips outside of the washing machine. Not unless you just had like giant boobs and stuck your head all the way in it. You basically would be banging your head on the back of the tumbler in the washing machine, the front load washing machine, for it to be in this position. Now I have seen some crazy college kids crawl into a washing machine with their legs and everything and get stuck that way. But then they're also combining that fetish with the incest older mother fetish. And if anything, I guess what this does is it lets them asset flip some 3D CGI characters very easily, because you don't have to even render faces or heads in this case, and render a very small laundry room. One of the screenshots has the character going to a refrigerator, and one of the screenshots has him holding a banana. Overall, though, it's probably not much of a game. It's probably just a simple visual novel thing that is kinetic. It's $2.24. It's English only. It says it has full audio in it. Yeah, I just don't know how much actual interactivity it is. Interestingly, I guess part of the gameplay concept here is that you're supposed to find items like the banana throughout the area, so it's kind of a hidden object game almost. But then you're using the items on the mother. Usually the fetish is that your girlfriend or your sister is getting stuck in the washing machine. As far as the incest, the older mother trope is less common. That was allowed on Steam though, unlike a much better game in the dungeon games. So if Valve really is going to go down the road of curation, why are they letting the incest, probably terrible quality 3D CGI adult games on the storefront? This game, The Warrior's Path, doesn't have enough polish to it. Yeah, we have a horror game called Stay Home. I mean, there really is no accounting for taste in porn. People are gonna like whatever they like, and curating that is kind of insane. Interesting, we have 2 copies of Stay Home back to back. Sometimes see that, I'm not sure why. Beast Dragon here is something we can definitely say no to. Kazu Adventures. Looks like it might be something. Playing as a dog. It's actually a surprisingly small number of games where you play as an animal or dog. Ultimate Front. It doesn't look good enough. Pocket Tank, we can probably say no to. Beach Restaurant is probably too simplistic. Yeah, we'll say no to that. Gimmicks Gadgets. Honestly, if we only see like 1 more adult game or 2 more adult games this week, it has been a fairly light week. We're getting into this pattern of getting 1 or 2 games every couple of days in the adult section, which definitely doesn't make it feel like the adult section is growing. And before it can even get better in quality, it really just needs to grow so there's more competition. Yeah, a lot of these games we can just say no to without even making comment on them. Some of these might be old games getting re-released, but that really doesn't mean much to me. Dragon Quest Treasures. Feel like we had already put that on the fall list. Whatever. Beast Blasters. Looks like the thumbnail is a real thumbnail of people, but on this trailer, or I guess the trailer is real people, but then everything else looks like a low effort asset flip. You know, hunting cryptozoology creatures, cryptids. Not a terrible idea of a game if you actually put some effort into it. Of course, you would have to lovingly animate each of those cryptids. That is something almost that you could have done with the Tomb Raider reboot is have Lara Croft just go all around America hunting cryptids, since the game was so hunting focused anyways. Um, escaped from Demon Island. Looks like it's a top-down twin-stick shooter kind of survival game, but it doesn't look terrible, so I'm going to give it a chance. K's Destiny. Looks like it's an RPG maker with a weird visual frame to make it 4x3. I'm going to say no to that. WTF platformer. Doesn't look like anything. We need to hurry. This is going way too long. Restaurant battle. Seems like you decorate your restaurant somewhat too. But overall, I don't think there's a game here. I think this is a asset flip decorating app at best. Mage Mayhem. I do wonder if I streamed every day if I could find a better balance on these long streams, but then I would end up just playing a lot more Yu-Gi-Oh! Than I want to. I'm gonna say no to Mage Mayhem. I'll be back at Dragon Quest Treasures because the game just realized I had two of the same tabs open. So apparently my duplicate tab feature only works sometimes now. Blackberry the Witch Journey. It's an interesting art style. Not sure there's really a full game here, but I'm willing to give it a chance as like a point and click adventure. That may be good enough. Yeah, we definitely need more art styles around point and clicks in particular, because you can really experiment on a simplistic point and click with different art styles, and the games would play just about the same. You don't have the same kind of visual metaphors and hints, visual hints that you need to do in a point and click that you might need to do in a 3D platformer, where 3D platformers need to like highlight the cliffs you can climb on and the ledges you can jump to. Cleanup project looks like nothing. Bank Tycoon looks like nothing. Golf Hole in One looks like nothing worth talking about. Brick Rigs doesn't look like much of anything. Battle Popes. Now that might be a fun parody gimmick if it really is something, but doesn't visually really look like anything. I like these art things, but when you get to this, it's just all glowing light and pixely. It doesn't really feel like a pope fighting a pope concept really makes sense. You know what I'm going to do is put this on the follow list, but I'm not going to make a YouTube short on it. They're calling it a MOBA, online PvP. Never mind that. I'm going to take it off. Nobody's going to play that much on such a gimmick. If it had been just single player, I would have given it a chance. Let's see. Ragmaton doesn't look like anything. Rising Spire looks nicely animated. Let's see. Here we have something called Your Personality Test, which looks like it's probably just a visual novel type game. But I don't think that's really a game. And calling it a point and click is different. Saying it's relaxing and a psychological horror is not accurate. Can't be both. $2.99 English only. I hope this isn't a precedent that we start to see a whole bunch of garbage personality questions, 70 questions overall. It does seem like there's some maybe secrets in here. So maybe there's a secret game behind this, and this is like Frog Fractions. I'll put this on the following list and see. But generally, I'm hoping, I would hope that that we don't see this become a pattern of garbage personality games, or games that are promising some kind of secret when the secret may not be a completely different game, which is what this would have to deliver on, is that behind this secret is a completely different game like Frog Fractions. Let's see, Venus 1 Galactic Overlords. Doesn't look like anything other than a bunch of red and blue things. Cottontail. Looks like it's a platforming game. I think I could say no to this, but I'll be generous. Yeah, I don't know how many of the Jump King clones need to really exist. Sea Feud is an underwater racing game. I'll be generous and say yes to that. How many more do we have to talk about today? Only 5 more games, good. So we will, with any luck, manage to avoid going for 4 hours. Next we have an adult game called Sweet Feats, which is 2D anime color palette ladies, although I would say it's not really very much an anime style, at least somewhat, but not that much. And combining that and foot fetishes, which, when you're talking foot fetishes, I guess there is a real question about, do you want to see behinds, do you want to see genitals, or do you just want to see the feet? In this case, you're seeing a lot of behinds and genitalia, while also seeing the feet, which makes all the characters have to pose in somewhat awkward positions so that you can see the bottom of the feet. Most of these are showing the bottom of the feet. There's one screenshot showing the top of the feet. I imagine that might matter to people with foot fetishes. There aren't any males in any of the screenshots, and it probably would be better if there were some males implied, as at least one male character for a foot fetish in particular. The interaction of the feet and a male is, I imagine, part of the fetish also. It says it's a simplest 2D puzzle game. As far as the description, it's $1.19. It's English only. I would say this is probably better than the Mother Stuck in the Washing Machine adult game, but only slightly, because it's cheaper and because it's going to give you more variety, and you're actually going to see people's faces and different hair colors and a variety of ladies, anime ladies. But it still is not really much of anything. Next game we have is called Glowing Stones Heroes Awakening, and it too is in the adult section. It's got some 3D CGI ladies in what looks like lingerie, almost like a superhero costumes or sci-fi costumes. Let's see. This seems to imply that there is a lot more story here than you would usually get. Superheroes and superpowers in a dystopian world dominated by mega corporations where greed and corruption is rampant. So yeah, there's a lot of 3D CGI characters in like superhero outfits. So you're getting a lot of variety if you enjoy the kind of asset flipped 3D CG characters. And the trailer is actually showing some motion, so at least some of them scenes are in motion. But weirdly, the game is in early access. It says it supports English and French, which is an interesting combination of languages. 16 achievements, if that means anything. Let's see. Interesting here in the description as far as the adult content, they're saying it has lewd language, teasing, blow, hand, and boob jobs, vanilla sex, and threesomes, female, female, male. But specifically, it's saying it's not planning having any NTR, which is just the Japanese word for cheating. No sharing of somebody, or free use might be another phrase there. No BDSM, bondage, discipline, sadism, and masochins. No violent and no non-consensual sex. So it's almost like describing the things it's not willing to do, so it gets on Steam. Which that's a lot of fetishes to just straight up say we're not planning on adding in our early access adult game. The problem with all of these, though, these 3D CGI games, is it's all just the exact same 3D models, and probably from the exact same 2 or 3 companies, using other names as publishers or developers to make it seem like there's more competition, when really there's just no actual competition, and why we haven't really seen any quality improvement. And inherently there is, if you put on the tinfoil hat and want to believe in a conspiracy theory, there is a valid conspiracy theory to at least entertain, to say that Valve is actively only approving very poor quality adult games on their adult storefront, and then actively saying no to high quality games that just happen to have adult content in it, like the Dungeons game. Although they are using a excuse, in my opinion, in that it is the anime moe looking characters that is stopping them from publishing it. But I've never seen a good quality 3D CGI adult game. Period. Just, I've never seen anybody bother to try and make a game like that or sell it anywhere, and maybe that would just be too expensive. But yeah, if you want good quality 3D CGI adult games, you're much better just playing Skyrim and putting adult mods in it yourself for free. And that's where your real competition would come from. And that's kind of a shame, because there's a lot of room to grow as far as the quality of these 3D models and the animation. Moving on, Goobies. Looks like a Survivors game, but it looks visually polished enough to deserve a follow and a YouTube short. Next we have a game called Bonnie's Bakery. I'm gonna say yes because it looks like there might be a lot more to this game than it meets the eye. At first it looked like it was just a Cook Serve Delicious clone, but it seems like there's a whole dungeon crawling element to it also. So that's enough of a game to say yes to. So you do all this cooking. Then you have to go to your refrigerator, and then or go to your basement, and then the game just totally changes. Yeah, so there's definitely a twist there. Let me make sure this next game is YouTube family friendly. Well, I guess we have a relatively tame visual novel here called Trouble Comes Twice. Seems it's a rom-com about twins which are trying to date other people, which that's an interesting idea, in that you're potentially not playing just one character that's either male or female, and instead are playing as twins. Interesting thought, at least. A little high at $15, I will say. So, and then our last game for today is called Under Pressure, which looks like it is a card game of some sort. Seems like it might even be a time-based card game, though. I don't know if there's going to be any multiplayer here. It's English and French, and it's free to play. So, it may be a case that as you play cards, you add pressure to your situation, and then you have to get more points fast enough to get away or to hunt it. Looks like there might be a game there. Alright, and so that's going to be the end of the show. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.